Chapter 1387. I wonder if Mo Yunjue and the rest have found the location of the mechanism. Xiao Hei's lively voice was filled with curiosity and anticipation. If Mo Yunjue and the rest had entered the stone room, then everyone would have found some extraordinary treasures. They should be able to find it. Master has already told us the key to finding the mechanism. Xiao Hai said slowly. Xiao Hai shook her head. That may not be the case. With so many cultivators suddenly coming in, there will be a lot of variables. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes twinkled as she pondered. I can't guarantee that everyone will be able to enter the stone room, but I believe that I'm not the only one. She had confidence in her companions. Although finding the difference required a lot of observation skills, as long as they focused, they would definitely be able to find it. As for those cultivators who had rushed over, there were naturally no lack of intelligent people. However, they were more knowledgeable than the rest. Following that, Bailey Hongzhuang placed the pill furnace into her chaos ring. Clearly, now was not the time to be immersed in the joy of finding treasures. The sooner she got out of the stone room, the more treasures she would be able to find. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang walked back to the stone room's main door. However, she found that the stone room's main door was tightly shut and did not show any signs of opening. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but frown. She kept feeling around the stone room's main door, trying to find where the mechanism to open the door was. Since they were able to enter, they would definitely be able to leave. Soon, Bailey Hongzhuang found a groove next to the main door. She pressed her finger lightly, and a sound was heard. Kacha-kacha, the sound of a mechanism turning. After hearing this sound, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately realized that it was the sound of a mechanism. She immediately looked around cautiously, not knowing if there would be any changes. However, after waiting for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang realized that the stone room's main door did not show any signs of opening. Master, the door behind us is opening. Xiao Hei's sharp eyes noticed the light at the back of the stone room. It was obviously a door. Bailey Hongzhuang narrowed her eyes. She looked at the open door, then at the tightly shut door in front of her. If possible, she hoped to return to the gate. After all, her teammates were all there. However, once they separated now, it would not be easy to see each other again in this huge ruin. Moreover, the cultivators who entered the ruins were in groups. Moving alone was undoubtedly full of risks. After seeing that the door showed no signs of opening, Bailey Hongzhuang no longer hesitated and immediately walked towards the door at the back of the ruins. Continuing to waste time here was the worst thing to do. As Bailey Hongzhuang walked out of the stone room, a quiet and secluded passage appeared in front of her. The sunlight shone on Bailey Hongzhuang's body, bringing a burst of warmth. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her head and stared at the ray of sunlight in astonishment. Her eyes were filled with a thick sense of astonishment. I'm actually seeing sunlight in the ruins? Could it be that there's no roof here? Bailey Hongzhuang was incredulous. This was just too strange. When she was outside, she had not noticed the existence of a patio above the palace. If that was not the case, how could she possibly see sunlight here? Chapter 1388. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly walked forward. Even though the scene was strange, it was more important to get out and find a way to meet up with her teammates. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang chose to disguise herself. Under such circumstances, disguising herself was the safest option. After all, she was alone and the danger was not small. If she met an enemy, it would undoubtedly be a big problem. After a simple disguise, Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance changed rapidly. She lost some of her alluring beauty and became more mediocre and ordinary. After confirming that there was no problem with her disguise technique, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately took a step forward and quickly walked outside. However, as Bailey Hongzhuang moved forward, a series of footsteps quietly entered her ears. Her pitch-black phoenix eyes were filled with a trace of seriousness. Bailey Hongzhuang's movements became more cautious. She lowered the sound of her footsteps, not knowing who the other party was. However, just as Bailey Hongzhuang lowered the sound of her footsteps, the other party's movements were exactly the same. The sound was also lowered. It was obvious that they had both discovered each other. Bailey Hongzhuang took out her colored glaze sword. Since she had already been exposed, she could only face it head-on. It would be best if they minded their own business. However, if they wanted to fight for the treasure, they could only fight. As the distance between them got closer, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes became calmer and calmer. The origin energy in her body quietly surged, and she was ready to fight at any time. Suddenly, a black figure appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang's line of sight. After seeing the black figure, Bailey Hongzhuang's nervousness quietly dissipated. "It's you?" Bailey Hongzhuang asked in surprise. She did not expect that the person who came was actually Mo Yunjue. Mo Yunjue frowned. He clearly did not know the woman in front of him, but her voice was extremely familiar. "Bailey Hongzhuang?" Mo Yunjue asked in confusion. He was very familiar with Bailey Hongzhuang's voice, but her appearance was clearly different. Hearing Mo Yunjue's words, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt. However, she quickly remembered that she had disguised herself. She immediately smiled and said, "That's right, it's me." Mo Yunjue obviously did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to come. However, the moment he saw Bailey Hongzhuang, a charming smile bloomed on his face. "We are really fated," Mo Yunjue said. Bailey Hongzhuang, she could not be bothered to Hongzhuang's teasing. Mo Yunjue nodded slightly. "That's right." Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's mind spun. Countless ideas appeared in her mind. She already had a certain guess in her heart. It seems that it's very likely that the cultivators who entered the stone room will come out from the passage and eventually gather here. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around. There were several passages not far from them. Obviously, they all gathered at the same place. After Mo Yunjue paid attention to the situation around him, his handsome face was full of agreement. "That's very likely. I wonder if Jiqing and the others have found the mechanism. If they're also in the stone room, then we can meet here." Bailey Hongzhuang pondered. Chapter 1389. From the words that Bailey Hongzhuang left behind after entering the stone room, they already knew the way to enter the stone room. Gong Xiaoqing and the rest were not stupid. There were more than 10 stone rooms, so the possibility of successfully entering was very high. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes brightened. "If that's the case, then that's naturally the best. Let's go ahead and take a look," Mo Yunjue said slowly. "I believe that the other cultivators who came out of the stone rooms will also come out immediately." Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang pondered for a moment, then nodded. Just as Mo Yunjue said, there was only one cultivator in a stone room, not to mention that everyone could come out at different times. Even if they really met, under the situation where there was only one person on each side, most of the cultivators would choose to go their own way. After all, no one was confident enough. Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue walked forward. After walking for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue suddenly realized that there was a wide, open space in front of them. However, when they saw the situation in front of them, their faces were filled with shock at the same time. In their line of sight, a dense forest appeared in front of them. The lush green trees and the faint sunlight gave Bailey Hongzhuang a faint illusion that they were in the outside world. "There's a forest here?" Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with shock. If it was said that she had previously suspected that it was a patio, at this moment, she completely denied it. This was just like another world, and definitely not in the palace. It was impossible for a forest like this to appear in any of the palaces. The situation before his eyes was simply too shocking. Mo Yunjue also looked at everything in front of him in shock and bewilderment. This scene was really unexpected. "This should be another small world," Mo Yunjue said slowly. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and looked at Mo Yunjue in surprise. However, she quickly understood. "A small world within a small world?" Mo Yunjue nodded. "I heard that some strong cultivators would create a small world when they were building ancient ruins. This is the only explanation for the situation in front of us. I wonder what this small world means." Bailey Hongzhuang muttered to herself. Every master of the ruins would not do something meaningless. The fact that the master of the ruins had purposely built a small world here was already enough to prove his strength. It seemed that Mo Yunjue was right. The strong cultivator who had left the ruins in this small world was the one who had built it. His dark and deep eyes flashed with a complicated light, and Mo Yunjue's face was filled with seriousness. I don't know. We can only take one step at a time. Boss, master, you're here. At this time, a happy and familiar voice sounded behind Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang. Listening to this familiar voice, Bailey Hongzhuang's face was also filled with joy. Jiqing, you're here too. Xia Jiqing quickly walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side and said with a smile, "Yes, what a coincidence. It turns out that the doors behind this stone room all lead to the same place." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. "I don't know if Shaoqing and the others have entered the stone room. If they have, we can gather here and continue to move forward." Chapter 1390. Xia Jiqing kept thinking about it in her mind. She still remembered that when she found the location of the mechanism, the other cultivators were still confused and did not know where the mechanism was. She felt that not everyone was as smart as the boss. If it were her, she didn't know how long it would take to find the mechanism. Only boss would be able to see through it and quickly figure out what the problem was. On this point, she really admired the boss. Although the other cultivators saw the mechanism they found when they entered the stone room, she believed that it would take them a lot of time to find the problem. During this time, it shouldn't be difficult for Gong Shaoqing and the others to find the mechanism. Maybe all of us have successfully entered the stone room. Mo Yunjue chuckled as he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang looked up at Mo Yunjue. Her expression didn't change. If this was the case, then it was naturally the best result. "Are you looking for us?" Gong Shaoqing's voice mixed with laughter sounded behind Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Hearing this familiar voice, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others turned around at the same time. They saw Gong Shaoqing and Dong Fengyu walking towards them with smiles on their faces. The team had a total of 8 people, and in this short period of time, they had already gathered 5 people. Bailey Hongzhuang was also very happy. At the very least, they had gained quite a lot from this trip to the ruins. Bailey Hongzhuang had already put away her disguise. Originally, she was worried that she would be alone, so she deliberately disguised herself. Now that everyone had gathered together, her disguise was no longer needed. "It seems that this time our harvest is very rich." Dong Fengyu's face was filled with a spring breeze smile. His pair of peach blossom eyes were even more attractive and charming. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked at each other and smiled. Each of them had a big harvest. Soon, Gong Shaoqing and Dong Fengyu's attention turned to the dense forest in front of them. Suddenly, a touch of astonishment climbed onto their faces. "My God, there's a forest in the ruins?" Dong Fengyu looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. "We couldn't have directly left the ruins, right?" Gong Shaoqing's expression also changed unpredictably. Could it be that because they had obtained enough treasures from the stone room, they were allowed to leave now? Looking at Gong Shaoqing and Dong Fengyu's stunned expressions, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but laugh. "We are still in the ruins. According to Mo Yunjue's guess, this should be another small world set up by the master of the ruins." After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the worried Gong Shaoqing duo relaxed. As long as they were still in the ruins, they still had a chance to continue fighting. "I wonder why you want us to enter this forest." Xia Jiqing's eyes were full of doubts. There were forests everywhere in the small world, and they had long been tired of seeing them. They did not expect that there would be a forest in the ruins. It would not be for them to hunt monsters, right? Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked at each other. None of them knew the meaning of the existence of this forest. In fact, from the moment they walked into the ruins, everything had become unknown. Chapter 1391. Since more than half of us have gathered here, why don't we wait for the others here? I believe they'll be able to enter successfully. Gong Shaoqing's eyes flashed with wisdom. Bailey Hongzhuang's words before they entered the stone room had given them a great inspiration. Although it would take some time to find it, he believed that by Junyu and the other 2 would be able to find the mechanism successfully. Moreover, according to what he knew, it was useless to simply tap on the wall. Unless they found the mechanism, they would only be able to open the stone room's door by touching the mechanism. This was also the reason why they could not open the stone room, even after knocking on the walls. The other cultivators were confused and would not be able to find the mechanism in such a short period of time. In comparison, Bai Junyu and the other two had more time. As long as they were ahead of the other cultivators, they would be able to enter the stone room successfully. Perhaps they would all meet here. Hearing Gong Shaoqing's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest pondered for a moment before nodding. If they could gather here, that would be for the best. Moreover, if Bai Junyu and the other two were left alone, it would be very dangerous. The five of them stood outside the passage, waiting for Bai Junyu and the rest to appear while checking out the situation in the forest. However, the forest in front of them was exceptionally quiet, and there was no movement at all. It was different from the forest in the small world. Fortunately, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest did not have to wait for long before Bai Junyu and the rest appear behind them. "Boss!" Yuan Xiaoman's joyful voice was the first to be heard, and her footsteps quickened. Listening to this familiar voice, the faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were filled with smiles. It seemed that their judgment was right. In their line of sight, Bai Junyu, Yuan Xiaoman, and Yuan Jixin were quickly approaching. "All of us have entered the stone room. We're so lucky." Yuan Xiaoman smiled excitedly. She was the last to enter the stone room. Previously, when she saw her boss and the rest enter the stone room one after another, she became more and more nervous, afraid that she would not be able to enter. After all, since they were already a team, no one wanted to be left behind. Fortunately, even though she was extremely nervous, she still managed to open the door of the stone room. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head, and a bright smile appeared on her exquisite and beautiful face. Just as Yuan Xiaoman said, their team had managed to enter the stone room, which was a very hard thing to believe for the other teams. "Since everyone is here, let's set off." Bailey Hongzhuang's exquisite jade-like face exuded a sense of heroism. Her phoenix-like eyes flickered with seriousness. They had already spent quite a bit of time in this stone chamber. Compared to some of the other cultivators, they had fallen far behind. If they did not speed up, they might not be able to obtain any of the treasures behind them. Just the stone chamber at the very front contained such precious treasures. From this, one could imagine how precious the treasures in the main hall of the ruins were. It would be a huge regret if he missed out on all these treasures. Chapter 1392. Bailey Hongzhuang's group slowly walked into the forest. As they walked, everyone was paying attention to the movements around them. However, they did not encounter any problems along the way. Originally, they were worried that there would be monster beasts, but they did not even hear the roar of a monster beast, which was really strange. After walking for a while, everyone had quietly relaxed a bit. Could it be that this forest is just an ordinary forest? We have been walking for so long, and nothing has appeared. Xia Jiqing's pretty face was full of doubts. This situation was really confusing. The master of the monument should not be so bored as to make such a small world, right? Yuan Xiaoman also showed a helpless expression. The scope of this forest was not small. They had walked for a long time, but they still could not see the end. The most important thing was that until now, she did not know the intention of the master of the monument to arrange such a forest. "Don't worry. I believe that the master of the monument must have his own arrangements." Mo Yunjue's voice slowly sounded. Compared to everyone's irritation and incomprehension, Mo Yunjue's face was only indifferent and calm. Bailey Hongzhuang continued to walk forward without saying a word. It was absolutely impossible for such a large forest to have no purpose. Suddenly, a series of footprints appeared in everyone's line of sight. "These are the footprints of cultivators," Dongfang Yu immediately said after looking at the large series of footprints. Looking at this series of footprints, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others found that this series of footprints was complex and dense. Obviously, there were many cultivators who had passed by. However, the origin of the footprints was not in the same direction as them. Eventually, it gathered with them, forming a three-way road. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the two completely different directions that finally converged at one point, and her mind quickly thought, maybe it's the road on the right. Mo Yunjue's voice was low and full of charm, revealing a deep seriousness. Listening to Mo Yunjue's words, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment, and then nodded. It's very likely. With so many footprints, it was obvious that a large group of cultivators had passed by. Thinking about it, there should still be quite a number of cultivators who had taken a left path like them who had stopped in front of the stone room. The footsteps shouldn't be so dense. Therefore, Mo Yunjue's judgment was most likely correct. We have to pick up the pace. Many cultivators are already ahead of us. Bailey Hongzhuang's beautiful face was dignified, and she immediately increased her speed. They couldn't be too much slower than the other cultivators. With Bailey Hongzhuang's words falling, Xia Jiqing and the others all increased their speed and quickly followed. It was rare to have such a good opportunity. They couldn't just watch the treasure be taken away by other cultivators. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others quickly followed the footprints. Just from the footprints, they could tell that there was no danger ahead, so they could increase their speed without hesitation. After rushing for a while, suddenly, a loud noise came into the ears of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. The cultivators of the Qinrun dynasty are really powerful. They actually defeated the Nine Suns' heavenly crocodile. This is not entirely the credit of the cultivators of the Qinrun dynasty. The cultivators of the Wanyan dynasty have already seriously injured the Nine Suns' heavenly crocodile. It is because of this that the cultivators of the Qinrun dynasty had the opportunity to kill it. Chapter 1393. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the others arrived, they saw a group of cultivators gathered in a circle in front of them. All the cultivators were gathered together. It was obvious that something had happened in the center. The Nine Suns' heaven crocodile. As soon as Bailey Hongzhuang approached, this keyword was already passed into her ears. The Nine Suns' heaven crocodile was an extremely powerful demonic beast. Its cultivation level was equivalent to a cultivator at the peak of the Orange Realm. Once they encountered it, it would be extremely troublesome. She did not expect to see it in the ruins. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest quickly approached, and an herb field appeared in their line of sight. It was a huge herb field. It was so big that it was no different from a mountain peak. However, the herbs in the herb field had almost all withered. Only the withered seedlings were left. It was obvious that no one had taken care of it for many years, and it had died long ago. Bailey Hongzhuang scanned the area, and her gaze landed on a stalk of immortal spiritual herb in the middle of the crowd. The immortal spiritual herb had the effect of saving lives. It was known as a life-saving immortal spiritual herb. The conditions for its growth were not harsh. However, it was extremely rare and could be said to be rare. Many cultivators would be able to save their lives with the help of this immortal spirit grass when they were severely injured. Therefore, this immortal spiritual herb could be said to be a sacred healing medicine. Almost all cultivators had an indescribable desire for the immortal spiritual herb. This was because as long as they had the immortal spiritual herb, it meant that they had a second life. However, this immortal spiritual herb was extremely rare and could not be seen on a normal day. Who would have thought that there would be a stalk of immortal spiritual herb in the ruins? It was really amazing. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up the moment she saw the immortal spiritual herb. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the withered condition of the herbs in the herb field and immediately understood. Logically speaking, even if these herbs had not been taken care of for many years, they would not have all died except for one stalk of immortal spiritual herb. As everyone knew, this immortal spiritual herb was extremely domineering. As long as there was an immortal forest, the energy of the surrounding plants would be absorbed by it. Therefore, there were no other plants around the survival spot of the immortal spiritual herb. It was the only stalk of immortal spiritual herb. After pondering for a moment, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but have a guess in her mind. Perhaps the owner of the ruins planted so many medicinal herbs just so that the immortal herbs could survive better. Obviously, there were so many herbs here, but the most precious one was undoubtedly the immortal spiritual grass. This stalk of immortal herbs was much fatter than the ones Bailey Hongzhuang had seen before, and its medicinal properties were also much better. At the same time, The discussions of the surrounding cultivators also reached Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. They had already understood the origin of all this. It turned out that there was a guardian beast outside the herb field. It was the Nine Suns' heavenly execution crocodile. Only by defeating this Nine Suns' heaven execution crocodile would one be able to unlock the restrictions of the herb field and successfully enter it. Previously, all the cultivators had been stopped by the Nine Suns' heavenly execution crocodile until the cultivators from the Qinrun dynasty and the Myriad Cloud dynasty appeared. The Qinrun dynasty and the Myriad Cloud dynasty were both large dynasty teams. Their strength had always been strong and far surpassed the average cultivator. Under the attacks of the cultivators from the Qinrun dynasty and the Myriad Cloud dynasty, the Nine Suns' heavenly execution crocodile fell. However, there was a huge dispute over who would obtain the immortal spiritual herb in the end. Pan Zimo, this Nine Suns' heavenly execution crocodile, died in my hands, so this immortal spiritual herb is naturally mine. Chapter 1394. Pan Zimo's expression was gloomy and ugly. Dong Hongyun, the cultivators of my team worked hard to severely injure the Nine Suns' heavenly killing crocodile. It was only a matter of time before we killed it. You only put in some effort at the back. It's impossible for you to snatch the immortal spirit herb with just that. Pan Zimo was not the only one. All the cultivators in the Myriad Cloud dynasty were filled with anger. They had spent a Herculean effort to severely injure the Nine Suns' heavenly killing crocodile. In the process, their team had also paid a heavy price. However, someone had appeared out of nowhere and wanted to snatch the immortal spirit herb with just a little effort. What was the difference between that and robbery? Most importantly, the Nine Suns' heavenly killing crocodile was extremely powerful. Their team had also suffered heavy injuries in the process of fighting the Nine Suns' heavenly killing crocodile. Under such circumstances, they were no match for the cultivators from the Qinrun dynasty. However, they were also unwilling to give the immortal spirit herb to the cultivators from the Qinrun dynasty. Dong Hongyun chuckled. Pan Zimo, the treasures in this ruin belong to whoever obtains them. If you're not convinced, our two teams can compete. However, before that, you have to consider the situation of your team. The immortal spirit herb is naturally a treasure. However, if your entire team falls here for one immortal spirit herb, it's not a good deal. As Dong Hongyun's voice fell, the cultivators from the Qinrun dynasty burst into laughter. They had seen the cultivators from the Myriad Cloud dynasty dealing with a Nine Suns' heavenly killing crocodile. That was why they had not made a move. It was only when the cultivators from the Myriad Cloud dynasty were about to finish off the Nine Suns' heavenly killing crocodile that they stepped forward to complete the final blow. After all, the most important thing in this ruin was to preserve one's strength. Since there was someone helping them to solve some obstacles for free, they were naturally more than happy to do so. The cultivators from a Myriad Cloud dynasty had extremely ugly expressions. The cultivators from the Qinrun dynasty had grasped this point, which was why they were so unscrupulous. Dong Hongyun, you're too despicable. Pan Zimo's face was gloomy. His stern voice was filled with anger as it came from his mouth. However, Dong Hongyun shrugged nonchalantly. His smile was filled with shamelessness and cunning. Pan Zimo, what you said is wrong. The cultivators from the Qinrun dynasty have always emphasized fairness. If you don't agree to compete, isn't this the rule of the Shengxian continent? Pan Zimo gritted his teeth as he looked at Dong Hongyun. Unfortunately, everything was under Dong Hongyun's control. Even if he wanted to change the situation, he had no chance. However, if they allowed the Qinrun dynasty cultivators to take away the immortal spiritual herb, what would happen to the Myriad Cloud dynasty's dignity? The morale of the brothers would also take a huge hit. The cultivators of the Myriad Cloud Empire are really unlucky. They spent so much effort only to end up helping the Qinrun Empire. I'm afraid they're going to die from anger. Who asked the cultivators of the Myriad Cloud Empire to be injured. Their strength can't be compared to the Qinrun Empire at all. Chapter 1395. After seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others felt a little helpless. The cultivators of the Qinrun dynasty were indeed shameless, but in the current situation, the team of the Thousand Cloud dynasty was really at a disadvantage. The cultivators of the Qinrun dynasty are really shameless. The cultivators of the Thousand Cloud dynasty are really unlucky. Xia Jiqing couldn't help but sigh after seeing this scene, although she was also very envious of the immortal spirit grass. In the current situation, she only felt that the faces of the cultivators of the Qinrun dynasty were very annoying. The immortal spirit grass is a rare treasure, but the Qinrun dynasty and the Thousand Cloud dynasty are both large dynasty teams. I'm afraid that we won't have a chance to get the myriad spirit grass. Yuan Xiaoman frowned. Such a precious treasure was something that every cultivator wanted to get, but they were not strong enough and could only watch. Gong Xiaoqing and the others were silent. If the strength of the opponents was not too different, they still had a chance to fight, but when the difference in strength was too big, it was not worthwhile to fight like this. Mo Yunjue's eyes also fell on the cultivators of the Thousand Cloud dynasty, but compared to the crowd, Mo Yunjue's eyes were different. When the eyes of the cultivators fell on the two dynasty teams that were arguing, Bailey Hongzhuang had already looked in another direction. After seeing the cyan figure, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes suddenly froze and became motionless. Han Xiling fell into an extremely bad state when she learned that Bailey Hongzhuang had fallen. When she learned that Bailey Hongzhuang had not fallen and that the so-called scream was just to deceive everyone, although she was very dissatisfied, there was a trace of relief in her heart. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang was not dead, she still had a chance to heal her throat in the small world. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang was not dead, she still had a chance to catch Bailey Hongzhuang and torture her. Because of Bailey Hongzhuang, she had been a mute for so long. It was a humiliation that could not be erased in her life. Even if he encountered cultivators he was familiar with, he did not dare to show himself because he did not want to show such a terrible scene in front of other cultivators. Ever since she entered the ruins, she had been searching for treasures while looking for Bailey Hongzhuang. Compared to the many treasures in the ruins, she hoped that she could find Bailey Hongzhuang as soon as possible and cure her throat. However, after entering the historical remains, she had not been able to find Bailey Hongzhuang. This made her extremely dissatisfied. She never thought that at this moment, she would finally meet Bailey Hongzhuang, the woman who she wished she could cut into 1,000 pieces. Miss Han, that's Bailey Hongzhuang. Wu Yuexin also noticed Bailey Hongzhuang, and his eyes were immediately filled with excitement. After searching for such a long time, they had finally found this hateful woman. Han Xiling's eyes were fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang, and he did not bother to hide the venomous and vicious light in his eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Xiling's eyes met in midair, and countless sparks flew as they collided. The grudge between them has been accumulated for a long time, and now was the time to resolve it. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was about to walk towards Han Xiling, Mo Yunjue suddenly grabbed her hand. Her wrist was suddenly pulled, and Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. She turned to look at Mo Yunjue, and there was a deep doubt in her eyes. Chapter 1396. As soon as the words came out, Bailey Hongzhuang's dark and cold eyes were filled with an imperceptible light. You have a way? The charm of the immortal spiritual herb was something that almost no cultivator could resist. The existence of a second life was an incomparably precious treasure. However, in this short period of time, she had already seen the situation in front of her clearly. There were many empires near the immortal spiritual herb, but the most powerful ones were from the Qinrun Empire and the Wanyin Empire. If not, the other cultivators would have already fought to be the first to obtain such a treasure. Why would they be standing obediently at the side now? There were also many large empires' teams present. In comparison, their team had no hope at all. Mo Yunjue's smile widened. I have a way. What way? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows, but quietly retracted her hand that Mo Yunjue was holding. Her pretty face was filled with seriousness and curiosity. Heavenly treasures were irresistible to any cultivator, and it was naturally the same for her. If there was a chance, she would definitely not let it go. Watch me. Mo Yunjue smiled mysteriously, then slowly walked towards the crowd. Han Xiling's gaze was fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang. When she saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was about to walk towards her, she was already prepared to fight. However, the scene of Mo Yunjue grabbing Bailey Hongzhuang's wrist was also clearly seen by her. Her sinister and fierce gaze suddenly changed. Although she had seen Mo Yunjue and Bailey Hongzhuang together, she did not think much of it. Although Mo Yunjue's appearance was not ordinary and his temperament was extraordinary, he was at most a cultivator from an empire. Regardless of whether it was his status or identity, he was far from being comparable to Brother D. She believed that Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely aware of this. However, based on the scene just now, could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang was really related to this man? At the thought of this, Han Xiling could not help but feel excited. In this way, what right did Bailey Hongzhuang have to compete with her for Brother D? She wanted to let everyone know of Bailey Hongzhuang's shameless actions. Mo Yunjue slowly walked towards the center of the crowd, his handsome face filled with a bright and elegant smile. Master Pan, long time no see. Pan Zimo immediately turned around and looked in the direction of the voice. When he saw Mo Yunjue, his face couldn't help but be filled with surprise. Master, Mo? Pan Zimo could not hide the shock in his eyes. He even suspected that he had seen wrongly. However, after taking a closer look, he was sure that the person in front of him was indeed Mo Yunjue. However, with Mo Yunjue's status, why would he participate in the assessment competition? Mo Yunjue slowly walked to Pan Zimo's side and said, "Young Master Pan, it seems that you need help." Hearing Mo Yunjue's words, Pan Zimo was slightly stunned. He then smiled and nodded. The Myriad Cloud Empire and the Qin Run Empire had always been rivals. Under these circumstances, the immortal spiritual herb was not that important. To him, even if the immortal spiritual herb fell into the hands of others, it would be far better than if it fell into the hands of Dong Hongyun and the others. As long as Mo Yunjue agreed to join their team, they would be able to join forces and defeat the Qin Run Empire's team. This way, although they did not have the immortal spiritual herb, their reputation would surpass the Qin Run Empire's. Chapter 1397. Pan Zimo had dealt with Mo Yunjue before, so he was very familiar with Mo Yunjue's style of doing things. However, under such circumstances, this was not a bad thing. On the contrary, even if they lost the immortal spiritual herb, they could still retain their dignity. When the cultivators of the Myriad Cloud Empire saw that someone had come to help, their originally ugly expressions eased a little. At least they would not be humiliated by the cultivators of the Qin Run Empire. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the others saw that Mo Yunjue knew the cultivators of the Myriad Cloud Empire, they could not help but look surprised. Young Master Mo really knows a lot of people. He even knows the cultivators of the Myriad Cloud Empire. Yuan Xiaoman's eyes shone with surprise. The Myriad Cloud Empire was a truly large empire. It was very far away, and she had only heard of it. Isn't young Master Mo from the Green Firmament Empire? Bai Junyu frowned. The distance between the Green Firmament Empire and the Myriad Cloud Empire is not ordinary. These two places, one in the east and one in the west, were extremely far away. It was hard to imagine that Mo Yunjue of the Green Firmament Empire would know the cultivators of the Myriad Cloud Empire. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Mo Yunjue's back, her eyes filled with confusion. She really did not understand Mo Yunjue's identity. However, with Mo Yunjue's vast knowledge, it was not strange that he had been to many places. Just like her, she had been in Fengbo country and had met Yuan Xiaoman and Yuan Jixin of the Snow Origin Empire. It was all fate. After seeing Mo Yunjue suddenly appear, Dong Hongyun's face could not help but change a bit. The immortal spiritual herb was already in their bag. They did not expect Mo Yunjue to suddenly appear. Could it be that something unexpected had happened? The cultivators of the Myriad Cloud Empire were on par with them in strength. Now that they were injured, their strength naturally could not be compared to theirs. However, With the appearance of an unfamiliar cultivator, their combat strength had to be reevaluated. Sir, this is a matter between our Qinrun dynasty and the Myriad Cloud dynasty. I hope you won't get involved. Mo Yunjue looked at Dong Hongyun indifferently. What if I say that I want to interfere? Hearing Mo Yunjue's words, Dong Hongyun's face immediately darkened. His gaze towards Mo Yunjue was filled with displeasure and threat. Are you sure you want to go against my Qinrun dynasty? I'm afraid you won't be able to bear the consequences. However, in the face of Dong Hongyun's threat, Mo Yunjue remained unmoved. You don't have to worry about that. All the spectating cultivators were dumbfounded when they saw Mo Yunjue suddenly barge into the situation. This fellow actually dared to rashly meddle in other people's business when two large empires' teams were clashing. He was really seeking his own death. Who is this black-clothed man? Why haven't I seen him before? The teams of the Qinrun dynasty and the Myriad Cloud Empire are extremely powerful. At this time, no one dares to interfere. This fellow actually dares to bump into the muzzle of the gun. He is really bold. This black-clothed man seems to be a cultivator from the Qianfeng dynasty. I saw him in the Qianfeng dynasty's team before. Qianfeng dynasty. When the crowd knew that Mo Yunjue was from the Qianfeng dynasty's team, their disdain and ridicule immediately disappeared. Chapter 1398. After knowing that Mo Yunjue was a cultivator from the Qianfeng dynasty, Dong Hongyun's expression changed. The cultivators from the Qianfeng dynasty were extremely powerful, and he had heard that the team from the Qianfeng dynasty was one of the strongest. However, he had never met a cultivator from the Qianfeng dynasty since the start of the assessment. Originally, this matter was set in stone. Once the cultivators from the Qianfeng dynasty interfered, coupled with the strength of the cultivators from the Wanyan dynasty, they would have no chance of winning. Young Master Mo, there is no enmity between us. Why do you have to interfere? Dong Hongyun put away the disdainful expression from before, and his posture also lowered a bit. This immortal spiritual herb was so close to being his, he didn't want to let it slip away from his hands just like that. Mo Yunjue glanced at Dong Hongyun and laughed maniacally. If you give the immortal spirit herb to me, I will not interfere. How about it? Hearing Mo Yunjue's words, Dong Hongyun's expression instantly turned ugly, and he looked at Mo Yunjue with dissatisfaction. If he had not taken a fancy to the immortal spirit herb, he would not have needed to confront the cultivators from the Wanyan dynasty. Mo Yunjue had obviously taken a fancy to the confrontation between the two teams and wanted to extort them. However, in this situation, Mo Yunjue's words carried a certain amount of weight. If he did not agree, then the Qianfeng dynasty's team and the Wanyan dynasty's team would join forces. There would only be one outcome for his team: defeat. If he agreed, then there was no need for this competition to exist. Suddenly, Dong Hongyun looked at Pan Zimo and said, Pan Zimo, are you going to give up the immortal spirit herb? Dong Hongyun's eyes narrowed and flashed with a sinister light. He did not believe that Pan Zimo would give up the immortal spirit herb so easily. Mo Yunjue's attitude was already very obvious. They were all people who wouldn't get up early if there were no benefits. Even if Mo Yunjue helped to defeat them, Pan Zimo would not be able to get the immortal spirit herb. He believed that Pan Zimo would not be willing to give it up. Facing Dong Hongyun's confident gaze, Pan Zimo's gaze became even colder and more resolute. Compared to a despicable person like you, I would rather give the immortal spiritual herb to Mr. Mo. Pan Zimo answered without hesitation. He had already thought of the answer the moment Mo Yunjue appeared. When the cultivators from Myriad Cloud Empire heard Pan Zimo's decision, a look of surprise appeared in their eyes. However, after thinking about it carefully, the doubts and unwillingness in the hearts of the cultivators from the Myriad Cloud Empire gradually disappeared. Compared to the Qinrun dynasty's cultivators taking it away, giving it to Mo Yunjue was a better way to preserve their dignity. Not only were they representing themselves, but they were also representing the Myriad Cloud dynasty. No matter what, they could not lose to Dong Hongyun. After hearing Pan Zimo's answer, Dong Hongyun could not help but be stunned. He looked at Pan Zimo in disbelief, wondering if he had heard wrongly. However, Pan Zimo's determined expression clearly told him that it was true. In an instant, the Qinrun dynasty's cultivators' faces turned ugly. This awkward situation seemed to have shifted from the Myriad Cloud dynasty's cultivators to them. If they left with their tails between their legs, they would lose all their dignity. Chapter 1399. After seeing the strategy used by Mo Yunjue, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with a touch of appreciation. Mo Yunjue was directly targeting the weaknesses of the two teams. As a result, the immortal spirit grass that originally had nothing to do with them was really likely to be in their pocket. Dong Honyun, we're here to help you. At this time, a female voice came from the crowd. The onlookers' faces were once again filled with surprise. Originally, this matter was full of twists and turns. They didn't expect that now another group of people would appear. This was really getting more and more exciting. Speaking of which, only after defeating the Nine Suns' heavenly killing crocodile could the restriction of the medicine field be removed. As long as the immortal spirit grass was not picked, the restriction in front would still not dissipate. Therefore, they could only wait here and watch the development of the situation. After hearing this familiar voice, Xia Jiqing and the others immediately looked in the direction of the source of the voice. After seeing a group of familiar figures, a strong sense of disgust filled the faces of Xia Jiqing and the others. The person who spoke was none other than Wu Yuexin. Han Shiling's group really came. Dong Fangyu frowned. They had been looking for Han Shiling and the others before, but they hadn't seen any trace of them. They didn't expect that they would appear in front of them at this time. They had been looking for so long. This time, it could really be said that new hatred and old hatred were settled together. It seems that since Han Shilling became a mute, this Wu Yuexin has become very proud. Xia Jiqing looked at Wu Yuexin with displeasure. Long ago, she found Wu Yuexin very unpleasant to the eye. With her strength, she thought that she was the first place. It was ridiculous. The most hateful thing was that Wu Yuexin looked down on their background. Thinking of Wu Yuexin's arrogant and complacent appearance, she wanted to send this woman directly to hell. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. It seems that today we have to deal with them together. Gong Shaoqing's voice was cold, and there was no warmth in his eyes as he looked at Wu Yuexin and the others. Seeing this, Yuan Gxin and Yuan Xiaoman looked at each other. Although they didn't know what kind of grievances there were between the boss and Han Shiling, in these days of getting along, they also knew that this contradiction was irreconcilable. Since they were mortal enemies, they didn't need to understand the reason behind it. They only needed to know that they were opponents. Dong Hongyun's eyes lit up when he heard that there were cultivators helping. However, when he turned around and saw that there were only 8 of them, his face turned ugly. A team from a mid-sized empire would not be of much use in such a battle. Their opponents were teams from 2 large empires. Which dynasty did this team come from? Why haven't I seen it before? It doesn't matter which dynasty it comes from, it's just a mid-sized dynasty. A team from a medium empire is actually going to get involved in the conflict between the teams from 3 large empires. Isn't this courting death? Looking at Dong Hongyun's appearance, he doesn't seem to know the cultivators in this team. In my opinion, they're crazy about the immortal spirit grass. They want to get the immortal spirit grass with their strength. Isn't this courting death? With the appearance of Wu Yuexin and the others, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also slowly moved forward and appeared in everyone's sight. Chapter 1400. Bailey Hongzhuang, I haven't seen you for a while, but your seductive skills are getting better and better. Wu Yuexin looked coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang, especially when she looked at Mo Yunjue. Her eyes were particularly complicated. She didn't understand what was so good about Bailey Hongzhuang. She was obviously a married woman, but now she dared to flirt outside. This man in black was so elegant and had an extraordinary temperament. Bailey Hongzhuang was not worthy of him at all. As Wu Yuexin's voice fell, the eyes of the cultivators fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. This woman in white gave people a feeling of impeccable, whether it was her appearance or temperament. However, the seductive appearance that Wu Yuexin spoke of was obviously not related to the appearance of the woman in front of them. This was because the temperament of this woman in white was extremely cold. There was a trace of coldness in her arrogance, and a trace of gentleness in her nobility. No matter from which point of view, she was not seductive at all. Wu Yuexin, do you believe that I will tear your mouth apart if you continue to talk nonsense? Seeing that Wu Yuexin dared to talk about Bailey Hongzhuang like this, Xia Jiqing was the first one who couldn't help but stand up. Listening to Xia Jiqing's words, Wu Yuexin's face was ugly. Xia Jiqing, you are really a good dog raised by Bailey Hongzhuang. The owner hasn't said anything yet, and you have already started to bite people. As soon as these words came out, without waiting for Xia Jiqing to speak, Bailey Hongzhuang's voice had already sounded first. If you have the guts, say it again. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were like a knife, and a terrifying aura broke out in an instant. The amazing murderous aura with endless coldness shot directly at Wu Yuexin. She had always regarded Xia Jiqing as her good sister, but Wu Yuexin dared to insult Xia Jiqing. She would never allow it. Wu Yuexin stared at Bailey Hongzhuang's pair of sharp and murderous eyes. Her mind couldn't help but tremble. A chill rose from her back, and an indescribable feeling of fear spread rapidly in her heart. For a while, Wu Yuexin didn't know what to say. Wu Yuexin kept opening her mouth. She had never seen such an imposing aura from Bailey Hongzhuang. It was as if she was going to cut her into pieces. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed. It seemed that the strength of this woman in white was not weak. Otherwise, she wouldn't have scared Wu Yuexin so badly that he couldn't say anything else with just one sentence. Jiqing is words, ants. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was cold and powerful. Her delicate and beautiful face flashed with a cold and glittering brilliance. The murderous aura she revealed stunned many cultivators present. Such a strong murderous aura was definitely not something an ordinary cultivator could emit. Just this point alone was enough to attract the attention of many cultivators. As everyone knew, the murderous aura released by a strong cultivator was not necessarily strong. Only cultivators who were stained with blood would have a murderous aura. The crueler the environment, the more bloody it was, the stronger the murderous aura would be. Bailey Hongzhuang's murderous aura was simply amazing. A woman in her teens had such a strong murderous aura. It was hard for everyone to imagine what kind of environment Bailey Hongzhuang came from. When everyone was puzzled, only Yuan Jixin and Yuan Xiaoman understood a little. Chapter 1401. Xia Jiqing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang emotionally. She rarely saw Bailey Hongzhuang so angry. Even when Wu Yuexin slandered her, Bailey Hongzhuang was still calm. However, when Wu Yuexin insulted her like this, Bailey Hongzhuang was angry. This point alone was enough to prove that Bailey Hongzhuang really treated her as a good sister. Thinking of this, Xia Jiqing felt a burst of warmth in her heart. In fact, in her heart, her biggest gain from cultivating at the Kangling College was knowing Hongzhuang. If there was no Hongzhuang, she was afraid that she would not have been able to go all the way until now. Because of Hongzhuang's excellence, she urged her to work hard and move forward. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were tightly locked on Wu Yuexin. If she did not have much feelings for Wu Yuexin before, now Wu Yuexin would definitely die. She would make Wu Yuexin pay a heavy price. Mo Yunjue's eyes also fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. He already knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was cultivating in the Bloodground Abyss. Not only that, Bailey Hongzhuang also obtained the inheritance of the Bloodground Abyss. Now it seemed that the Bloodground Abyss had made Bailey Hongzhuang change a lot and become more ruthless. However, as a cultivator, this was an extremely good change. Pan Zimo looked at Mo Yunjue in surprise. With Mo Yunjue's identity, he should have appeared in the team of a large dynasty. At this moment, it seemed that Mo Yunjue was in a medium-sized team. Young Master Mo, which dynasty are you from? Pan Zimo couldn't help but ask. For him, in this battle with the Qinrun dynasty, they must win. There was no room for jokes. Tiangang dynasty. Mo Yunjue chuckled. After knowing that Mo Yunjue was from the Tiangang dynasty and not the Qianfeng dynasty, Pan Zimo's expression changed again and again. If Mo Yunjue was only from a medium-sized dynasty, then it was unknown whether they could win this battle. Although Pan Zimo and Mo Yunjue's conversation was low, Dong Honyun on the opposite side could still hear it clearly and couldn't help but laugh. It turns out that this young Master Mo is also from a medium-sized dynasty. I thought you were a great character. You actually dare to shout at a cultivator from the Qinrun dynasty. I think you are looking for death. Dong's face was gloomy as Water's worse eyes was full of threats. Originally, he thought that Mo Yunjue came from the Qianfeng dynasty, which made him worried. It turned out that all of this was fake. How ridiculous! In the face of Dong Hongyun's threat, Mo Yunjue remained unmoved. So what if it's a medium-sized empire? You will still be defeated by us. Haha, Dong Hongyun chuckled and turned to look at Pan Zimo. Pan Zimo, it seems that your reinforcements aren't that strong. I originally planned to let you guys go as long as you obediently hand over the immortal spiritual herb. Since you guys are so stubborn, then I can only give you a hard slap in the face. Dong Honyun smiled proudly. The strength of the two medium-sized dynasties wasn't too different, and they could completely take care of the cultivators from the Myriad Cloud dynasty. They were definitely going to win this battle. Pan Zimo's expression was very ugly. He couldn't help but look at Mo Yunjue and said, "Young Master Mo, are you really confident?" Their situation was different from the Tiangang dynasty. Even if the cultivators from the Tiangang dynasty failed this time, it wouldn't affect them much. Chapter 1402. Mo Yunjue's long eyebrows were slanted, his demeanor was relaxed, and his slightly raised lips revealed a trace of confidence. "Young Master Pan, you don't believe me?" Listening to Mo Yunjue's words, Pan Zimo couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Only then did he remember the identity of Mo Yunjue and immediately shook his head. "No, that's good." Mo Yunjue smiled and turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang. "It seems that this battle is inevitable." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "Since we have to fight sooner or later, let's settle it once and for all." She would never let Han Xiling leave the assessment alive. Since they met today, she would settle it once and for all. Han Xiling looked coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang. She wanted to speak, but her throat couldn't make any sound. It was really uncomfortable. The next moment, Han Xiling glanced at Wu Yuexin. However, Wu Yuexin didn't dare to speak again. Just now, Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze was too terrifying. It was like a nightmare. She didn't dare to speak again. Han Xiling looked at Wu Yuexin angrily. How arrogant was Wu Yuexin usually? Now that she saw Bailey Hongzhuang, she was so cowardly. If this fell into the eyes of other cultivators, wouldn't it mean that they were afraid of Bailey Hongzhuang? She absolutely couldn't let everyone think so. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Han Xiling's squeaky appearance, and her lips curled into a mocking smile. "Han Xiling, how does it feel to be a mute?" Hearing this, Han Xiling's gaze immediately fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. His eyes were full of anger, but he couldn't say a word. Xia Jiqing saw Han Xiling's appearance, and there was a touch of novelty in her eyes. "Boss, since you turned Han Xiling into a mute, I feel that my ears are a lot quieter." If it was a normal day, Han Xiling would have already been unable to hold back the urge to curse. Now looking at Han Xiling's face full of resentment, but he couldn't make a sound, she only felt very happy. This guy was born to be a mute. Compared to his previous arrogant appearance, he looks much more pleasing to the eye now. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were full of sarcasm. Just by looking at Han Xiling's eyes, she knew that she hadn't been taught a lesson. Last time, she only turned him into a mute, but this time it wasn't so simple. With the voice of Bailey Hongzhuang falling, Han Xiling was even more furious. Bailey Hongzhuang dared to say such things to her. She was so angry that she kept opening her mouth, but she couldn't make a sound. After seeing this scene, everyone also understood that the reason why Han Xiling became a mute was caused by Bailey Hongzhuang. Suddenly, everyone's gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but change a bit. They didn't expect such a beautiful woman to have such ability. Han Schilling's appearance was also outstanding. Therefore, this competition between the beauties was very popular. Looking at this, it was obvious that they had been holding grudges for a long time. Bailey Hongzhuang, don't be too arrogant. You will soon die in our hands. At this time, a man standing behind Han Schilling made a sound. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at the man. She also had some impression of this man. Xin Yangbing's performance in the assessment at that time was also very outstanding, second only to Wu Yuexin. However, she didn't communicate with him before. She didn't expect Xin Yangbing to stand up now. Chapter 1403. In the face of Xin Yangbing's threatening words, Bailey Hongzhuang still had the appearance of a cloud, indifferent and wanton. If the cultivators of the two teams fought before, they still needed to fight hard. However, after this period of cultivation, the gap between the strength of the two teams was gradually narrowing. As long as they fought, Han Schilling and the others could no longer maintain their current complacency. Xia Jiqing and the others were also rubbing their hands at the moment. They had been cultivating hard during this time and had never slacked off at all. It was all for today's confrontation with Han Schilling and the others. When they were in Tiangang's sect, because their strength was not strong enough, they had been suffering from everyone's ridicule. Now, after such a long time of hard work, they believed that this time when they fought again, they would no longer be the side that was completely suppressed. Dong Hongyun had already understood after seeing the grievances between Bailey Hongzhuang and the others and Han Schilling's team. It seemed that Han Schilling's team saw the existence of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others and deliberately came to find trouble. Pan Zimo, under such circumstances, are you sure you still want to go against us? Dong Hongyun looked at Pan Zimo. Although he had no interest in the grievances between Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Schilling, he had to admit that the appearance of Han Schilling had reduced their team's trouble. However, since the strength of the two medium-sized Empire teams was equally matched, there was no need for him to join in. As long as the cultivators of the Thousand Cloud Empire agreed to give up, they could save some effort and get more treasures in the ruins. Listening to Dong Hongyun's words, Pan Zimo also had some hesitation. He originally thought that Mo Yunjue's team was a team from a large empire. He did not expect it to be a team from a small empire. The most important thing was that the Qinrun Empire also had a team from a medium-sized empire as a helper. As a result, their Thousand Cloud Empire was also at a disadvantage. If they were still the ones who lost after this battle, then it would really be a disgrace. When Mo Yunjue saw Pan Zimo's conflicted expression, his voice slowly rang out. Young Master Pan, since you want to fight, then don't hesitate. As Mo Yunjue finished speaking, Pan Zimo could not help but be stunned for a moment before he nodded. Okay. He had almost forgotten that with Mo Yunjue's background, killing him was a simple matter. Evidently, Mo Yunjue wanted to obtain this immortal spirit herb. If he tried to stop them, he would be courting death. Therefore, he had no other choice at the moment. Seeing that Pan Zimo was still insistent, with a look of fear towards Mo Yunjue, Dong Hongyun was puzzled. Mo Yunjue was just a cultivator from a mid-tier dynasty. With Pan Zimo's status, there was no reason for him to be afraid. Dong Hongyun couldn't figure out the reason behind this at all. However, since there was no turning back, he did not mind teaching the cultivators of the Thousand Cloud Empire a lesson. It would be best if he could use this opportunity to severely injure the team from the Thousand Cloud Empire. Then, when they returned to the Qinrun Empire, the Emperor would definitely reward them greatly. Chapter 1404. Pan Zimo, I originally wanted to give you a chance. Since you're so stubborn, I can only teach you a lesson. Dong Hongyun looked at Pan Zimo and the others with disdain. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to kill Pan Zimo. At the same time, the cultivators behind Dong Hongyun took out their weapons and a cold light flashed in their eyes. Dong Hongyun turned to look at Han Schilling and the others and said, Friends, I'll leave the cultivators from Tiangang Dynasty to you. Hearing that, Wu Yuexin nodded slightly and said, Don't worry, leave it to us. Seeing that Dong Hongyun and the others had set up their formation, the cultivators from Myriad Cloud Empire could not hide their worry. They did not understand what was wrong with their leader. Logically speaking, there was no benefit for them to join the battle team. Even so, their leaders still chose to fight. This was too strange. However, at this time, they could not question their leader's actions. It was really frustrating. Pan Zimo's heart was also filled with helplessness. However, at this time, he could only pin his hopes on Mo Yunjue. Mo Yunjue patted Pan Zimo's shoulder and gave him a reassuring look. Seeing that, Pan Zimo felt more at ease. Dong Honyun, let's see who will emerge victorious. Pan Zimo's voice was cold. Since Dong Honyun appeared, he had been looking for trouble with him. He had been feeling aggrieved for a long time. Now that he had decided to fight, his breathing became smoother. Seeing Pan Zimo's confident look, the mockery in Dong Honyun's eyes deepened. In his opinion, Pan Zimo was completely blinded by anger. Now, with just a few cultivators from a middle-sized empire, he wanted to turn the tables. It was simply a fantasy. Pan Zimo, don't you kneel down and kowtow to me later and beg for mercy. Dong Hongyun revealed a sinister smile. Because I won't let you go. Pan Zimo's face turned cold. Dong Hongyun, if you fall into my hands, I'll let you know how it feels to be humiliated. While the cultivators from Qinren Dynasty and Wanyan Dynasty were fighting, the conflict between Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shiling's team was escalating. Bailey Hongzhuang, you've only participated in the competition for a few months, and now you've hooked up with another man. You're really shameless. After Wu Yuexin was frightened by Bailey Hongzhuang, he recovered after Han Shiling's advice. It was just a look, and Bailey Hongzhuang was not that strong. She was actually afraid of Bailey Hongzhuang because of this. Wu Yuexin felt extremely embarrassed when he thought about his performance just now. Hence, his voice was exceptionally loud at this moment. It was as if this was the only way she could regain the dignity she had just lost. You should know that you're a married woman. I'd like to see how you're going to face others if you don't abide by the rules. Wu Yuexin's words became more and more sarcastic. She could not help but look at Mo Yunjue, wanting to know Mo Yunjue's attitude. In fact, she was attracted to Mo Yunjue from the first time she saw him. His tall and burly figure, his extraordinary noble temperament, and his handsome appearance were enough to make any woman's heart beat faster. Chapter 1405. She only hoped that through her words, she could attract Mo Yunjue's attention. She believed that Mo Yunjue absolutely did not know that Bailey Hongzhuang was married. Once Mo Yunjue knew, he would never continue to be with Bailey Hongzhuang. She wanted everyone to know that Bailey Hongzhuang was a foxy woman. Han Shiling's eyes showed a deep smile. What Wu Yuexin said at the moment was exactly what she wanted to say. Bailey Hongzhuang had made her suffer so much, she would never let Bailey Hongzhuang be happy. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she wanted everyone to know what kind of person Bailey Hongzhuang was. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang's face was ruined, she believed that Digu would not accept Bailey Hongzhuang. Digu would only be hers. Listening to Wu Yuexin's words, Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. She did not expect Wu Yuexin's words to be so vicious. Sure enough, as Wu Yuexin's voice fell, the surrounding cultivators' gazes towards Bailey Hongzhuang changed. I didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to have such a beautiful appearance, but her life is so messy. It's really surprising. I've already said that such a beautiful woman is born foxy, but you men don't believe it. You really can't judge a book by its cover. I didn't expect her to be a married woman. In the Shangxian continent, many cultivators were extremely conservative. A man could have 3 wives and 4 concubines, but a woman must be loyal. For some women whose lives were extremely messy, most cultivators could not accept it. Therefore, after knowing that Bailey Hongzhuang's life was so messy, everyone had a sense of disgust towards Bailey Hongzhuang. Wu Yuexin, you're not going to say anything? Don't pour dirty water on my boss. Xia Jiqing was the first to speak up. Rumors had always been extremely terrible. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and it would not be long before this news spread to everyone. Once it was confirmed, it would be a shame that could not be washed away for a lifetime. In fact, no one would care about the authenticity of this. Boss would be the wife of the young lord of Tiangang's sect in the future. If such a rumor spread, it would be extremely unfavorable to Boss. Wu Yuexin chuckled. How am I pouring dirty water? What I said is the truth. An unknown woman could actually become the wife of the young master of the Tiangang sect. This point alone was enough to make everyone speculate a lot. Dong Hongyun and Pan's eyes also fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. According to their thoughts, they thought Bailey Hongzhuang should be a woman. They did not think that under such a pure appearance was such a woman's under such a pure appearance was a woman. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Wu Yuexin coldly. A woman's mouth was so vicious. She could understand Wu Yuexin's vicious intentions. She wanted to make her unable to bear the burden of this rumor. However, she was not a person who would be so easily splashed with dirty water. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was about to speak, Mo Yunjue put his hand on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. Seeing this scene, the cultivators present all took a breath of cold air. At this time, Mo Yunjue still dared to put his hand on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. Didn't this mean that everything Wu Yuexin said was true? Chapter 1406. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes also fell on Mo Yunjue. She didn't understand why Mo Yunjue suddenly did this. It was really surprising. She immediately wanted to pull Mo Yunjue's hand away, but Mo Yunjue's strength was so great that she couldn't break free from Mo Yunjue's shackles for a while. Mo Yunjue's eyes looked straight at Wu Yuexin. His dark and deep eyes were full of disgust, and his voice was filled with a bit of coldness. Even if you want to splash dirty water, you have to find a more credible statement. Mo Yunjue turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang, and his eyes were filled with gentleness. Hongzhuang is my sister, and I have an affair with her? I really admire your imagination. With Mo Yunjue's voice falling, the faces of the cultivators present changed again. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Mo Yunjue in surprise. She never thought that Mo Yunjue would use such a method to help her clear her name. She knew very well that in the case of Wu Yuexin splashing dirty water, no matter how she denied it, it wouldn't be of much use because most of the cultivators would think that she was quibbling for herself. However, Mo Yunjue's words changed the situation. She was Mo Yunjue's sister. When Mo Yunjue said all this, the credibility was far higher than Wu Yuexin's words. Anyone in such a situation would choose to believe Mo Yunjue. As a result, the words of Wu Yuexin and others would have no power. On the contrary, Wu Yuexin and others would become the object of everyone's disdain. Xia Jiqing and others, who were originally very dissatisfied with Mo Yunjue's actions, heard Mo Yunjue's words, and their expressions changed a bit. Others didn't know, but they knew that Mo Yunjue liked Bailey Hongzhuang. However, when Hongzhuang was being slandered like this, Mo Yunjue could say such words to protect Bailey Hongzhuang. Just this point alone had proved Mo Yunjue's sincerity. At least, he was sincerely looking out for Hongzhuang and didn't want people to slander her. What nonsense is this Wu Yuexin talking about? He said that there is an affair between them. These two are brother and sister. I said that Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue's looks are so outstanding. It turns out that the two are brother and sister. No wonder they are so good-looking. This team of a middle-sized empire's team is really despicable to say such words to slander a woman. They are too vicious. I have long seen that this woman's temperament is so elegant. It is absolutely impossible for her to be the woman that Wu Yuexin said. For a time, the cultivators present immediately changed the topic, and suddenly one by one, Zhuge Liang ran out. However, compared to the disdain everyone had for Bailey Hongzhuang before, now everyone was full of disgust and disdain for Wu Yuexin and others. Generally speaking, even if there was a conflict between cultivators, it would be a fight at worst. Wu Yuexin actually came up with such a vicious way, it really made people ashamed. Fortunately, Mo Yunjue was Bailey Hongzhuang's brother. If it was another man, this slander would be confirmed. As a woman, how important was her reputation? Suddenly, Everyone stood on Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Wu Yuexin was completely dumbfounded after hearing Mo Yunjue's words, and his brain couldn't react for a while. Mo Yunjue was actually Bailey Hongzhuang's brother? How is this possible? Chapter 1407. Wu Yuexin's gaze fell on Mo Yunjue's handsome and flawless face. This at least proved that Mo Yunjue didn't like Bailey Hongzhuang. Compared to Wu Yuexin's joy at the moment, the faces of Han Xiling and the others were extremely ugly. Han Xiling stared at Mo Yunjue. She didn't believe what Mo Yunjue said. She had never heard that Bailey Hongzhuang had a brother. What's more, if Mo Yunjue was really Bailey Hongzhuang's brother, Bailey Hongzhuang should have taken Mo Yunjue to Tiangang's sect to participate in the assessment. How could they be together in this assessment? It was ridiculous. However, even if she knew that this was impossible, at this moment, she couldn't find a reason to refute it. Not to mention, she was still mute. Han Xiling looked at Mo Yunjue incomprehensibly. She didn't understand why Mo Yunjue would say such a thing. Could it be that he really liked Bailey Hongzhuang so much? He liked her so much that he would do anything to protect Bailey Hongzhuang? When Han Xiling's mind came up with this idea, she couldn't believe it. Over the years, there were many men who pursued her, but those were only interested in her appearance and identity. She didn't know where the people who really liked her were. She didn't understand why the people around Bailey Hongzhuang were willing to sacrifice everything for her. Even Xia Jiqing couldn't understand. Xia Jiqing had always defended Bailey Hongzhuang. She didn't know what benefits Bailey Hongzhuang gave Xia Jiqing to make Xia Jiqing so loyal. Pan Zimo and Dong Hongyan also put away their opinions after seeing this scene. In fact, Pan Zimo never believed it. With Mo Yunjue's identity, what kind of woman didn't he have around him? How could he fall in love with a married woman? Bailey Hongzhuang's mind moved and the glass sword appeared in her hand. A pair of breathtaking eyes exuded a heart-palpitating light. You will pay for what you said. At the same time, the Yuan power in Bailey Hongzhuang's body burst out in an instant. After feeling Bailey Hongzhuang's strength of Orange Realm Level 5, Han Xiling's eyes revealed a strange color. She didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang's improvement to be so fast. Bailey Hongzhuang had only been in the small world for a few months, but she had already advanced 3 levels. She thought that she was already very happy. She didn't expect that Bailey Hongzhuang's speed would be faster than her speed. At the thought of this, Han Xiling's eyes couldn't help but be filled with jealousy. She had always been the pride of Tiangang's sect. Few cultivators of the same age could compete with her. However, as the gap between Bailey Hongzhuang and her gradually narrowed, the sense of urgency in her heart became stronger and stronger. There was an unspeakable tension. With Bailey Hongzhuang's aura, the speed of Xia Jiqing and the others was not slow. They had been waiting for this day for a long time. Han Xiling and the other's strength was also exposed. However, Wu Yuexin and the others were dumbfounded after seeing Xia Jiqing and the others' progress. Thinking back, the gap between Xia Jiqing and the other's strength was huge. Now, in just a few months, their strength had improved so much. This was unbelievable. Chapter 1408. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others didn't care about the surprise of Wu Yuexin and the others. Their figures flashed, and they immediately rushed up. Bailey Hongzhuang was the first to meet Han Xiling. The grievances between them had to be solved by themselves. Xia Jiqing and the others also quickly met Wu Yuexin and the others, each looking for their own opponents. Mo Yunjue looked at the situation of the two teams. The difference in strength wasn't very big, so there shouldn't be any problems. He knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had a lot of trump cards, but the battle between the Thousand Cloud Dynasty and the Qin Run Dynasty was more worrying. Soon, Mo Yunjue had made a decision. He first took care of one person in Han Xiling's team, and then went to help the cultivators of the Thousand Cloud Dynasty. After all, they must get the immortal spirit grass. Just as Mo Yunjue was about to take care of an opponent, Wu Yuexin was already standing in front of him. Wu Yuexin stood in front of Mo Yunjue. Looking at Mo Yunjue at a close distance, She felt that Mo Yunjue was very handsome. Young Master Mo. Wu Yuexin looked at Mo Yunjue with some hesitation. If she knew that Mo Yunjue was Bailey Hongzhuang's brother, she wouldn't have been an enemy of Bailey Hongzhuang. But in the current situation, even if she wanted to change her attitude, it wouldn't be easy. Compared to Wu Yuexin's complicated feelings, Mo Yunjue didn't even bother to listen to her words. In fact, such a woman couldn't enter his eyes at all. What's more, Wu Yuexin's words to Bailey Hongzhuang had already proved her viciousness. This kind of woman, he wouldn't even look at her normally. Without waiting for Wu Yuexin to finish her words, Mo Yunjue had already hit her with a palm. Boom! Wu Yuexin was hit hard. His body flew in a parabola and finally landed on the ground. Following everyone's line of sight, Wu Yuexin's face was flushed red, and the veins near his temples were bulging. His hands were clutching his chest, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Wu Yuexin looked at Mo Yunjue, who was not far away, only to see Mo Yunjue glancing at her indifferently before turning away. To Mo Yunjue, other than Bailey Hongzhuang, there was no difference between male and female cultivators. If it wasn't for the fact that this woman had gone overboard, he would have left her alive for Bailey Hongzhuang to deal with. Otherwise, he would have taken Wu Yuexin's life. Wu Yuexin covered her dantian with both hands. Her flushed face gradually turned pale. Her eyes were filled with fear and emptiness. She could not believe what had just happened. However, the spirit power that constantly overflowed from her body clearly reminded her that her dantian was destroyed. Mo Yunjue directly destroyed her dantian. This proved that she could no longer be a cultivator. What's more, in this small world, a waste would definitely die. She didn't think that Mo Yunjue would be so ruthless. He didn't even look at her from the beginning to the end. Xia Jiqing and the others were dumbfounded when they saw Mo Yunjue directly cripple Wu Yuexin. They could guess that Mo Yunjue's strength was very strong, but they didn't expect Mo Yunjue to be so decisive and domineering. It was beyond everyone's imagination. Wow, young Master Mo is really bad *SS. Xia Jiqing looked at this scene and said with emotion. Chapter 1409. Listening to Yuan Xiaoman's words, the cultivators of the Tiangang dynasty all showed a refreshed smile. The things that Wu Yuexin had done before had already made them unable to bear it. They want to clean up Wu Yuexin, but they didn't expect Mo Yunjue to be so domineering. He directly destroyed Wu Yuexin's dantian. Now Wu Yuexin was a waste, and she had no ability at all. Xia Jiqing looked at Wu Yuexin coldly. Damn Wu Yuexin. She dared to say that about her and her boss. Now she also wanted to let Wu Yuexin taste the pain. Feeling Xia Jiqing's gaze, Wu Yuexin couldn't help but shudder. When she thought of all the things she had done before, she knew that Xia Jiqing would never let her go easily. As a result, she could almost imagine her next ending. Han Xiling and others obviously didn't expect Mo Yunjue to be so swift and decisive. It was just one move, and they lost one of their combat power. At this moment, Han Xiling and the others had a bad premonition. When Mo Yunjue made a move, they didn't even feel the fluctuation of Mo Yunjue's ability. This alone was enough to prove the strength of Mo Yunjue. They had found a strong opponent. Han Xiling glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang. She didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be so capable. She could find such a powerful helper in the small world. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Han Xiling's constantly changing expression. With a wave of her right hand, a silver needle quickly shot out. Han Xiling didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to suddenly use a silver needle. With a careless move, the silver needle pierced her throat again. Feeling the existence of this silver needle, Han Xiling didn't dare to pull it out like last time. If something went wrong, she couldn't bear it. Before you die, if you have anything to say, then say it. Bailey Hongzhuang's red lips curved into a mocking smile. Today, she would definitely not give Han Xiling the chance to escape. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Han Xiling was stunned and immediately tried to speak. Bailey Hongzhuang. After not speaking for a long time, Han Shiling's voice was hoarse and unpleasant to the ears. When she opened her mouth, even she couldn't help but frown. However, after discovering that he could speak again, Han Shilling couldn't help but rejoice. This at least proved that she hadn't really become a mute. Bailey Hongzhuang, I will cut you into 1,000 pieces today. Very quickly, Han Shilling got used to speaking and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with eyes full of hatred. Thinking about the humiliation she had suffered these days, she felt that even if she cut Bailey Hongzhuang into 1,000 pieces, it wouldn't be enough to vent her anger. I'm afraid you don't have the ability to do so. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was calm. Her right hand gripped the glazed sword tightly, and a murderous aura spread out. You think too highly of yourself. Han Shilling laughed coldly. Your ability has indeed improved very quickly. However, you're now at Orange Level 5, and I'm already at Orange Level 7. What do you have to compete with me? The difference of 2 levels was enough for her to crush Bailey Hongzhuang. Then let's try. Bailey Hongzhuang said nonchalantly. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's calm expression, Han Shiling's gaze sharpened. Don't think that your little tricks can fool everyone. Chapter 14:10. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Han Shilling, speechless. Han Shilling seemed to treat these groundless accusations as the truth. Now Han Shilling was making such a solemn vow, as if she had suffered a great grievance. It was really funny. Do whatever you want. Bailey Hongzhuang rolled her eyes. She raised her azure glaze sword with her right hand, and the primary force in her body surged. Han Shilling was not slow either. A green sword appeared in her hand. She leaped forward and pierced her sword towards Bailey Hongzhuang with a sharp sword aura. Clang! Bailey Hongzhuang countered with her azure glaze sword at the same time. The old and new grudges between the two of them could not be resolved. At this moment, each of their attacks was ruthless. They wanted to kill each other in one move. Clang! 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 The crowd saw Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shilling turning into 2 whirlwinds. The green and white figures were entangled with each other, and it was hard to tell them apart. Sharp sword chi and bursting sparks continued to spread out, and cracks appeared on the ground around them. The cultivators who were watching the battle quickly retreated and distanced themselves when they saw the battle. However, they did not expect the battle between Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shilling to be so intense. Even though they were spectators, they could feel how powerful that sharp sword chi was. I did not expect these 2 ladies to be so powerful. This is surprising. Looks like this is going to be a fierce battle. Bailey Hongzhuang is only at Orange Level rank 5, while Han Shilling is at Orange Level rank 7. Why is it that Bailey Hongzhuang is not at a disadvantage when they are fighting? When Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shilling revealed their abilities, they already knew the difference in their abilities. However, they did not expect the battle to be so different from what they had imagined. When Han Shilling was fighting with Bailey Hongzhuang, there was a strong shock in her heart. Her clear eyes were fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang, and she did not understand. This was her first real battle with Bailey Hongzhuang. With Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation base, it was impossible for her to fight with Han Shilling for so long without showing any signs of defeat. If she was an ordinary cultivator, it would be fine. However, cultivators who did not come from a good background would not be strong enough even if they raised their cultivation base. As for Han Shilling, she grew up in Tiangang's sect, and her grandfather had generously given her good cultivation resources. Even cultivators of the same level would not be able to hold on for so long. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was clearly weaker than Han Shilling. It was unbelievable that she could still hold on. If Bailey Hongzhuang knew about Han Shilling's thoughts, she would not be bothered. Han Shilling had only grown up in Tiangang's sect, while she was the head of the Bailey family in her previous life. With 2 different identities, it was easy to tell who had the higher status between them. The martial arts techniques that she had mastered were more powerful than Han Shilling's. Thud, thud, thud. In the next moment, the 2 figures that had been tightly entwined suddenly separated. Bailey Hongzhuang had to admit that Han Shilling's abilities were real. She was not weak at all. Therefore, it would not be easy to defeat Han Shilling in a short period of time. However, She believed that she would defeat Han Xiling in the end. While Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were fighting, the battle between the Qinrun dynasty and the Myriad Cloud dynasty had also begun. Chapter 1411. Mo Yunjue's move to defeat Wu Yuexin also had a certain impact on Dong Hongyun and the others of the Qinrun dynasty. Although Wu Yuexin's strength was not strong, Mo Yunjue was able to defeat him in one move, which was enough to prove that his strength was not simple. On the other hand, Pan Zimo and the others could not help but breathe a sigh of relief after seeing this scene. Mo Yunjue's strength was still very trustworthy. Xia Jiqing's group of 6, as well as Xiao He and Xiao Bai, were in full swing with their opponents. The disparity between them had now been quickly narrowed, and with Xiao He and Xiao Bai's help, their battle had become a lot easier. Boom! Ding ding ding! Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Xiling did not retreat, and their fighting power fully erupted. In the process of the long swords being constantly entangled, the swords in their hands flew to the ground. Seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Xiling looked at each other, and the fierceness in their eyes increased. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's figure took a few steps back, and the spirit energy in her body roared out crazily, continuously pouring into her hands. Immediately afterward, her palms turned, and a complex seal quietly appeared, and the fluctuations of energy quietly spread out. At the same time as Bailey Hongzhuang's movements, Han Xiling also began to use his martial arts. She absolutely could not let Bailey Hongzhuang have a chance to improve, and an indescribable sense of urgency suppressed her chest. If she let Bailey Hongzhuang continue to grow, maybe the next time they meet, Bailey Hongzhuang's strength would really be stronger than her. When she thought of this, the killing intent in her heart became stronger. She must take this opportunity to kill Bailey Hongzhuang. Sacred Azure Flame Palm. Bailey Hongzhuang shouted coldly in her heart, and a huge cyan palm appeared in midair. After using the sacred Azure Flame Palm several times, Bailey Hongzhuang was now more and more proficient in it, and there was no difficulty and obstruction like before. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not stop because of this. Her hand seals changed, and the huge cyan palm began to shrink rapidly. She never underestimated Han Xiling's idea. Han Xiling, as the representative of Tiangang's sect, was extremely famous and naturally had a certain ability. Therefore, she needed to be more careful when competing with Han Xiling. When the onlookers saw Bailey Hongzhuang display such a move, their eyes showed a strange look. Bailey Hongzhuang's move. This move was not simple. When Xianyuan Huan and Bailey Haoshuan saw Bailey Hongzhuang's move, they were even more shocked. Although they had already expected Bailey Hongzhuang to be powerful, they did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be so powerful. The ability of an Orange Realm level 5 was far beyond their expectations. Who would have thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's combat power was comparable to an Orange Realm level 7 cultivator? When they thought about themselves, the gap between them was really shocking. When the power of Bailey Hongzhuang's martial skill spread, Han Xiling also displayed his martial skill. 19 Dark Phoenix Finger. As Han Xiling's voice fell, a huge finger that was more than 10 feet long appeared in midair. Fine vein patterns covered the thick fingers, and a terrifying energy was transmitted from the fingers, causing people's hearts to palpitate. However, many of the cultivators stared at the finger, and their expressions changed. Chapter 1412. 19 Dark Phoenix Finger. Isn't this the unique skill of Tiangang's sect for women? A cultivator's face was filled with shock as he asked doubtfully. Tiangang's sect, for many cultivators, was a sect that they yearned for. Some of the cultivators present came to participate in the assessment competition in order to become a cultivator of Tiangang's sect. Therefore, they also had some understanding of the unique skills of Tiangang's sect. When the man mentioned the origin of the 9 Nether Phoenix Finger, the other cultivators reacted one after another. I say, why do I feel that Han Xiling's name is very familiar? She shouldn't be Han Xiling of Tiangang's sect, right? Another cultivator wondered. When he said this sentence, he also had a feeling of disbelief in his heart. After all, The distance between Han Shieling and them was too big. They never thought that Han Shieling would appear in front of them. What's more, with Han Shieling's identity, there was no need to participate in the assessment competition, so no one thought in this direction. After this man's reminder, the other cultivators' faces changed. They didn't think in this direction before, and they didn't care. Now that they thought about it carefully, all of this was really possible. My God, it turned out to be Han Shieling. This Bailey Hongzhuang is really dead. Offending Han Shieling is simply a death sentence. Xia Jiqing only wanted to refute after hearing the conversation of this group of cultivators. Her boss was the wife of the young master of Tiangang's sect. Her identity was even better than Han Shieling. However, after thinking about it for a moment, Xia Jiqing still didn't say it. After all, this identity should be announced by the boss herself. The most important thing was that although Tiangang's sect knew the identity of the boss and Di Beichun didn't hold a wedding in Tiangang's sect. Now, many cultivators wouldn't believe it. After Han Shieling heard the appreciation and admiration of a group of cultivators, a thick smile appeared on her face. This was the aura that belonged to her. On the other side, after knowing the identity of Han Shieling, Dong Hongyun and Pan Zimo, who were fighting on the other side, suddenly changed their faces and their movements paused for a moment. Dong Hongyun was slightly stunned, but then he showed a proud smile. Pan Zimo, you are now an enemy of Han Shieling. I think you have no hope of joining Tiangang's sect in the future. Dong Hongyun sneered. He and Pan Zimo were rivals for a long time, so he knew Pan Zimo's situation very well. Pan Zimo had always wanted to join the Tiangang sect. With his strength, as long as he performed well in this assessment competition, it was very possible. However, after such a thing happened, Pan Zimo no longer had any chance. As soon as he thought of it, Dong Hongyun felt very happy. Pan Zimo's face immediately became ugly. If he knew that the opponent was Han Shiling of Tiangang Zone, he would never be an enemy. However, things had developed to this point. Even if he wanted to regret, there was no use. Pan Zimo's heart was bitter. He couldn't help but look at Mo Yunjue. If Mo Yunjue wasn't here, he wouldn't choose to continue this battle. Taking advantage of Pan Zimo's distraction, Dong Hongyun stabbed Pan Zimo's heart. Pan Zimo only felt a pain in his chest. When he reacted, it was too late. Chapter 14:13. Mo Yunjue pulled Pan Zimo to his side with one hand. His long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly as his expression revealed a sense of impatience. Pan Zimo was still in a state of shock. Only when Mo Yunjue pulled him back did he realize that his chest was only injured. Because Mo Yunjue had acted in time, he did not lose his life. If you don't have the heart to fight, I can save you once, but I won't save you twice. Mo Yunjue was slightly cold. His eyes were as deep as a black hole and did not contain the slightest bit of warmth. Looking at Mo Yunjue's deep and cold gaze, Pan Zimo could not help but shiver. Only then did he regain his senses and immediately nodded. I understand. Seeing this, Mo Yunjue patted Pan Zimo's shoulder and his voice slowly traveled into Pan Zimo's ears. Bailey Hongzhuang is the wife of Tiangang's sect's young sect master. It's just a Han Shieling. What are you afraid of? The contemptuous and disdainful tone fully proved Mo Yunjue's disdain for Han Shieling. If Hongzhuang had not wanted to personally deal with Han Shieling, he would have crippled Han Shieling long ago. Pan Zimo, who was still immersed in his own sorrow, was stunned when he heard Mo Yunjue's words. When he came back to his senses, an incredulous look appeared on his face. Gulp! Pan Zimo swallowed a mouthful of saliva. When he found out about Han Shiling's identity, it was enough to shock him. Now that he knew about Bailey Hongzhuang's identity, he only felt that it was unbelievable. However, after thinking about it carefully, a woman who had such a deep grudge with Han Shieling should have an existence similar to Han Shieling. Just from the previous conversation between Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, he could understand that the conflict between the two was not something that had happened overnight. Everyone knew that Han Shieling, like Tiangang sect's young sect master, and many cultivators believed that Han Shieling was the future young sect master's wife. If Bailey Hongzhuang was the person that young sect master liked, then everything could be linked together. Once he thought of this, Pan Zimo's entire body was energized. Han Xiling was just a cultivator of Tiangang sect, while Bailey Hongzhuang was young sect master's wife. He believed that Mo Yunjue would definitely not deceive him on this matter. As a result, Han Xiling and Bailey Hongzhuang, whose identity was more honorable, could be said to be clear. Dong Hongyun only saw Pan Zimo's figure recover in a short period of time. Although he heard Mo Yunjue's words, he did not hear what Mo Yunjue said clearly. What kind of words could restore Pan Zimo's spirit in such a short time? Dong Hongyun could not understand. Pan Zimo walked in front of Dong Hongyun once again as his handsome face was filled with ridicule. Dong Hongyun, you're dead meat. Looking at Pan Zimo's huge change, Dong Hongyun frowned. Pan Zimo, what did Mo Yunjue say to you earlier? Pan Zimo looked at Dong Hongyun indifferently and replied coldly, you don't need to know. Seeing Pan Zimo's arrogant attitude, Dong Hongyun's heart was filled with anger as the sharp sword in his hand attacked Pan Zimo once again. Since Pan Zimo said it, he would hit Pan Zimo until he said it. After Pan Zimo knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was Tiangang sect's young sect master's wife, he seemed to have been injected with chicken blood as his sharp sword fiercely pierced forward. Dong Hongyun actually took advantage of his dazed state to injure him, so he would definitely not let Dong Hongyun have a good time. Chapter 14:14. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Han Xiling's 9-yin dark phoenix finger as ripples appeared in her cold and moving phoenix eyes. Just from this energy fluctuation, she could feel the power of this 9-yin dark phoenix finger. She was afraid that it was even stronger than the strengthened green flame sacred palm by a level. If these two martial skills were to collide, she would probably lose. Han Xiling's face broke into a pleased smile. Even in the previous exchange, Bailey Hongzhuang's battle power was on par with hers. However, once she used her martial skill, Bailey Hongzhuang's background would make her martial skill's power incomparable to hers. The 9-yin Dark Phoenix Finger was an extremely famous female martial skill in Tiangang sect. However, it was extremely difficult to cultivate, and most cultivators would not be able to cultivate it. With the status of the 9-yin Dark Phoenix Finger in Tiangang sect, there were not many cultivators who had the opportunity to learn it. Furthermore, the difficulty of learning the 9-yin Dark Phoenix Finger was so high that most cultivators would not be able to cultivate it successfully. She had always been proud of her success in cultivating the 9-yin Dark Phoenix Finger. On this point, even the sect leader had praised her for her outstanding talent. Today, she had used this move in order to defeat Bailey Hongzhuang in one fell swoop. She wanted to let Bailey Hongzhuang know how big the gap between their abilities was. Even if she had to kill Bailey Hongzhuang today, she wanted to let Bailey Hongzhuang understand the huge gap between them before she died. Bailey Hongzhuang is going to be miserable this time. How powerful is the 9-yin Dark Phoenix Finger? Most martial skills simply cannot be compared to it. Her opponent is Han Xiling. No matter how hard Bailey Hongzhuang tries, it's only a last-ditch struggle. This time, she's dead for sure. Sigh, such a beautiful lady is going to die here. It's really a pity. Some of the men present looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's flower-like and jade-like face, and the sorrow in their hearts gradually deepened. If it were them, they would not have the heart to be so ruthless. Bailey Hongzhuang, you will die today. Han Xiling glared coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang. From the moment Bailey Hongzhuang appeared, her originally carefree days had become a lot more troublesome. Big Brother D was originally destined to be her man, but Bailey Hongzhuang actually tried to steal her man. Most importantly, Big Brother D was always protecting Bailey Hongzhuang, which made her even more unhappy. She had never thought that Big Brother D would treat her like this for a woman. She had never seen Brother D's cold and merciless gaze before, and it was all because of Bailey Hongzhuang. Today, she was finally going to get rid of Bailey Hongzhuang, this stumbling block. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but feel happy. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang was gone, Brother D would definitely become her man. Only she was fit to become the wife of the young sect master of the Tiangang sect. Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix-like eyes narrowed at the sight of Han Shiling's triumphant look. Under these circumstances, she could only give it her all. In this world, there are always many unexpected things that happen. Bailey Hongzhuang was not afraid because of the situation before her. This was going to be a fierce battle, but no one would know the result until the end. Han Shiling laughed icily. You sure are confident. I'd like to see if you'll still be so confident when you die. Chapter 14:15. Seeing Han Shiling's move, Bailey Hongzhuang's movements were not slow at all, and the Azure Flame's sacred palm quickly won. Boom! The two attacks collided with a loud bang, and an earth-shattering collision sound rang out in the air. Every cultivator present felt a roar in their ears. They swiftly unleashed their essence force to resist the shock waves that spread out. Their figures rapidly retreated as they watched the battle from afar. Everyone only saw the huge finger and the cyan palm colliding together. Just the difference in size made people feel that Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely lose. Sure enough, after the cyan palm collided with the finger for a while, the energy was gradually worn out by the huge finger. A spiderweb-like crack appeared in the center of the cyan palm, and then dense cracks quietly appeared. Finally, the cyan palm shattered and disappeared in midair. On the other hand, there were only a few more cracks on the huge palm, but it did not have much impact. At this moment, it was fiercely crushing towards Bailey Hongzhuang. Everyone was secretly speechless. If this finger fell on Bailey Hongzhuang, then Bailey Hongzhuang would be crushed into minced meat. After seeing this scene, Xia Jiqing and the others' faces were filled with worry. They did not expect Han Shiling's strength to be so strong. The power of this kind of martial arts made people feel irresistible from the bottom of their hearts. Boss is in danger. Xia Jiqing's face was full of worry, but in this situation, she could not go over. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's critical situation, Mo Yunjue's black pupils were also filled with a touch of worry. His figure rushed, and immediately wanted to help Bailey Hongzhuang resist everything. However, at this moment, a tyrannical aura once again spread from Bailey Hongzhuang's body. Mysterious sky glass sword. Bailey Hongzhuang once again shouted coldly, and a huge and fierce sword slowly emerged from midair. The glass sword, which was completely condensed by Yuan Li, released a powerful energy fluctuation as soon as it appeared. Bailey Hongzhuang did not hesitate to let the mysterious sky glass sword meet it. She knew that the power of Han Shiling's 9 Dark Phoenix finger was great. She could only block this 9 Dark Phoenix finger by using 2 martial arts in succession. After Mo Yunjue saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was able to cast another martial skill at such a fast speed, his original choice was also put down. He could feel the power of Bailey Hongzhuang's martial art, and it should not be life-threatening. This was a battle between the two women, and he wanted Bailey Hongzhuang to solve all this by herself. There were many things that could only be done with one's own hands. Boom! The dark sky-colored glaze sword met the mysterious and ancient giant finger in midair. At the moment of the collision, it was as if thunder from the 9th heaven resounded. A ripple of Yuan Li visible to the naked eye spread out, and an astonishing power broke out. The abnormal and astonishing fluctuations spread quickly. After feeling such a terrifying fluctuation, the cultivators all looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and Xia Jiqing in horror. No one thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and Xia Jiqing's fighting power would be so terrifying. If it were them, they would only die under such an attack. Chapter 14:16. Not only was the battle between Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shiling so terrifying, but the battle between the cultivators of the Qinrun dynasty and the Wanyan dynasty was also extremely powerful. For a time, the area within 100 miles seemed to have become a huge battlefield. Smoke and dust rose everywhere, sand flew all over the sky, and energy ripples continued to spread. The destructive power was extremely astonishing. Everyone looked at this scene in amazement. This was the battle between the teams of large dynasties. The power was really terrifying. Not to mention the large dynasties, just the combat power of the two medium-sized teams of Han Xiling and Bailey Hongzhuang was enough to amaze people. Bailey Haoxuan and Xianyuan Huan were in the crowd. Looking at the smoke-filled battlefield, their eyes were filled with horror. After seeing the strength displayed by Bailey Hongzhuang, Bailey Haoxuan didn't know what to say. In just over a year, Bailey Hongzhuang's progress was so terrifying. Most importantly, he heard that Han Xiling was an extraordinary figure in Tiangang's sect. Bailey Hongzhuang actually dared to be enemies with Han Xiling. Wasn't this courting death? Xianyuan Huan could only remain silent at this moment. Under such a terrifying energy collision, only death would await him if he participated. As the smoke and dust gradually dissipated, the figures of Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Xiling were revealed in everyone's sight. However, compared to the two beauties before the battle, Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Xiling were a bit embarrassed at this moment. Han Xiling's cyan clothes were stained with blood at this moment. Her beautiful hair was a bit messy, and her delicate and beautiful face was pale. Obviously, the battle just now consumed a lot of her strength. Bailey Hongzhuang's situation was no better than Han Xiling's. It was even a bit more serious. An enchanting flower of blood blossomed on her white dress. On her shoulder, blood continuously flowed out from the wound, dyeing the shoulder of her clothes red. Her exquisite, jade-like face was indescribably pale, but her pair of ink-black phoenix eyes still flickered with a determined and fearless light. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Xiling took out medicinal pills from their chinkoan bags almost at the same time and quickly swallowed them. Bailey Hongzhuang took qi, recovery pills, and healing pills at the same time. That collision earlier had consumed a great deal of her origin energy. Not only that, there were already considerable injuries within her body, and her internal organs had suffered shock. She had no choice but to admit that the might of the Heavenly Dipper sect's martial techniques was truly not simple. The might of this 9-een Nether Phoenix finger far surpassed martial techniques of the same level. Han Xiling saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was still able to withstand that attack, and his pretty face couldn't help but be filled with dissatisfaction. Who would have thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was so tenacious that she was still alive? Bailey Hongzhuang, even if you dodge that attack just now, you will still die in my hands. Han Xiling's gaze was cold, and his pretty face was filled with malevolence and resentment. The better Bailey Hongzhuang performed, the stronger the anger in his heart. Faced with Han Xiling's cold gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a cold smile, and such a smile bloomed on her pale face, adding a bit of weakness and poignant beauty. Mo Yunjue looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, and his figure flashed and directly appeared beside Bailey Hongzhuang. Leave the rest to me. Chapter 14:17. Following Mo Yunjue's words, Han Xiling's expression turned even uglier. Compared to Mo Yunjue's powerful battle prowess, she had already sustained some injuries from her fight with Bailey Hongzhuang. If she were to continue fighting with Bailey Hongzhuang, she believed that she would definitely be able to kill Bailey Hongzhuang. However, once Mo Yunjue made his move, she would be dead meat. Just by looking at Mo Yunjue's previous attacks, she could tell that Mo Yunjue was extremely powerful. Thinking of this, Han Xiling's gaze fell upon Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang, this is a battle between you and me. Didn't you say that you weren't afraid of me? Now you're asking a man to make a move. What kind of skill is that? Han Xiling pretended to be calm as she looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. However, her eyes were filled with anxiety. As long as she killed Bailey Hongzhuang, she would still have a chance to escape. Because once Bailey Hongzhuang was dead, everything would be settled. As long as she turned around and ran, she believed that Mo Yunjue and the rest would not give up on the temptation of the inheritance and chase after her. Every man for himself, and the heavens take the hindmost. This was everyone's nature. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were as cold as water. Her pretty face was filled with determination and determination. All right, today we'll decide who's the winner. Just as she spoke, Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Mo Yunjue and said, "Don't worry, I can do it." There were some things that needed to be resolved personally. She wanted to end the enmity between her and Han Shilling on her own. No matter how attractive the inheritance was to the current her, ending Han Shilling with her own hands was the most important thing, because this was her obsession. Hearing this, Mo Yunjua looked deeply at Bailey Hongzhuang. He instinctively wanted to stop Bailey Hongzhuang from doing so. However, when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang's determined eyes, the words that he wanted to say were stuck in his throat. In the end, he did not say anything. He once had the same obsession. He wanted to give his all for the sake of his own happiness. Hence, at this moment, he could not refuse. Mo Yunjua stared at Bailey Hongzhuang and nodded. All right. The corners of Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up into an elegant smile. Her gaze then fell upon Han Shilling. She will definitely kill Han Shilling. When Han Shilling saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had really agreed, the joy in his eyes deepened. Bailey Hongzhuang is really digging her own grave. I will definitely make Bailey Hongzhuang regret this. When the surrounding cultivators saw this scene, they sighed deeply in their hearts. What kind of enmity is there between Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shilling? She actually wants to end it with her own hands? I don't know. I'm afraid that it's a deep hatred. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's decision is not very wise. I think that Bailey Hongzhuang has quite a backbone. Cultivators should have such backbone and pride. Even though most of the cultivators felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's decision was very foolish, they also admired Bailey Hongzhuang from the bottom of their hearts. After all, a cultivator should be so unyielding without the slightest bit of regret. This was the true essence of cultivation. Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shilling's eyes met again. Then, almost at the same time, Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shilling did the same action. Chapter 1418. Bailey Hongzhuang took out pills from her heaven-earth bag. She wanted to fight Han Shilling for the last round. This round would determine life and death, as well as victory and defeat. She had always prepared a lot of energy recovery pills. The most common situation that cultivators encountered outside was the exhaustion of their yuan power. Therefore, the consumption of energy recovery pills was extremely fast. Normally, when they were rushing between cities, the Qi recovery pill was a medicinal pill that they often used. Therefore, she had already prepared enough energy recovery pills long before she participated in the assessment competition. Han Shilling's situation was needless to say. As the granddaughter of the Tiangang sect's great elder, she had always had a lot of cultivation resources, not to mention the fact that she needed pills very much on a daily basis. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shilling ate the pills as if they were eating jelly beans. They did not care at all. Seeing this scene, everyone felt somewhat helpless in their hearts. Pills were extremely precious to them. Usually, they would try their best to use them sparingly. It was impossible for them to eat the pills as if they were eating jelly beans like Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shilling. As expected of a member of a sect, the amount of cultivation resources they have is really enviable. I wonder what Bailey Hongzhuang's identity is. Looking at her, her identity should not be any worse than Han Shilling's. But I've never heard of Bailey Hongzhuang's name. The crowd looked at each other. They knew some of the famous cultivators in each sect. Just like Han Shilling's name, they had at least heard of it. However, the name Bailey Hongzhuang was really unfamiliar to them. Han Shilling's expression turned ugly when he saw that Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation resources were not any less than his. Bailey Hongzhuang, I didn't expect you to get so many cultivation resources from Big Brother D. Han Shilling's eyes were filled with disgust. With Bailey Hongzhuang's identity, it was impossible for her to have so many cultivation resources. Needless to say, she knew that this must have been arranged by Brother D. Whenever she thought of how well Big Brother D treated Bailey Hongzhuang, she would go crazy with jealousy. Bailey Hongzhuang was too lazy to explain to Han Shilling. She had always only explained things to those she cared about. As for those she didn't care about, she didn't care at all what they thought. Are you envious? Bailey Hongzhuang smirked and looked at Han Shilling playfully. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, Han Shilling's face instantly turned ugly. She didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be so calm. Speaking of which, whenever she and Bailey Hongzhuang argued, Bailey Hongzhuang would say something that would anger her to death. It was really infuriating. Then you should enjoy it. This is your last chance in life. You talk too much nonsense. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Han Shilling impatiently and then retracted her gaze. After taking the energy recovery pill, Bailey Hongzhuang felt a wave of energy quickly enter her body and replenish her energy center, which was almost depleted of primary energy. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't waste any more time. The primary energy in her body quickly surged out. As her hands moved, an increasingly strong force spread out. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had begun to move, Han Shilling didn't delay any longer. After this move, Bailey Hongzhuang would die in her hands. Chapter 1419. Gradually, the speed at which Han Shilling's hands moved became faster and faster. The golden light in her hands became denser and denser, sparkling with a dazzling and enchanting light. However, what everyone cared about was not how beautiful the light was. What they felt was the power that made their hearts palpitate. This power was even more shocking than when Han Shilling had displayed the 9 Dark Phoenix Finger. Golden Wheel Crescent Moon. Han Shilling shouted coldly. Her almond-shaped eyes were filled with a vicious light as she stared fixedly at Bailey Hongzhuang. It was as if she wanted to annihilate Bailey Hongzhuang along with the Golden Wheel Crescent Moon. Under the crowd's astonished gazes, a golden crescent moon slowly rose from behind Han Shilling and appeared in midair. Even the radiance of the sun seemed to be blocked by this crescent moon. It was different from the usual gentleness of the moon. The crescent moon that Han Shilling had condensed was even sharper and more threatening, causing people to tremble in fear. Han Shilling's face was extremely pale. This golden wheel crescent moon was a martial technique that she had only recently mastered. Its power was extremely powerful. However, with her current cultivation, she was unable to fully display the power of this golden wheel crescent moon. She could only display a portion of its power. However, even so, it was enough. Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely regret making her an enemy. However, this ending was destined to be irreversible. When Han Shilling was displaying her martial technique, Bailey Hongzhuang was also displaying her martial technique rapidly. The crowd stared in shock at the dazzling speed at which Bailey Hongzhuang was condensing her hand seals. They could only see an aqua-blue seal that constantly deepened and changed. However, they could not see how Bailey Hongzhuang was moving. Under such a high frequency of condensation, Bailey Hongzhuang's fair and thin hand began to show traces of blood. This was because the speed of condensation was too fast. Looking at this scene, the crowd was secretly speechless. It was their first time witnessing such a scene when forming a seal. However, just from the complexity of the hand seals, everyone could tell that this move of hers was not simple. Suddenly, Bailey Hongzhuang's hand seals changed, and a scalp-numbing aura spread out. Immediately after, a black lotus flower appeared behind Bailey Hongzhuang. The black demonic lotus spun slowly and emitted a mysterious and profound power. The black demonic lotus rotated and slowly opened. A trace of red appeared in the center of the black demonic lotus. The intertwining of black and red revealed an indescribable magic. A faint smell of blood quietly spread, causing people to think of Bailey Hongzhuang's hand that was dripping with blood. An energy that was not the slightest bit weaker than the golden wheel, mysterious moon swept out, instantly dyeing the golden sky with a touch of black. The originally bright sky was now occupied by two colors, black and gold. No one was willing to give way to the other. High heaven, devil lotus. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze was cold. Her beautiful face was as pale as paper, which made her pair of pitch-black eyes seem even more bottomless. Feeling the martial technique that Bailey Hongzhuang was displaying, Han Shilling's expression changed a little. This was because she could feel the shocking energy contained in Bailey Hongzhuang's martial technique. Her cold almond eyes were filled with doubt. She had never heard of this high heaven devil lotus before. It should not be a martial technique of Tiangang's sect. In this way, she could not figure it out. Chapter 1420. This kind of martial skill, just from its power, could be judged that its power was definitely not ordinary. It was not easy for her to get the golden wool profound moon. The higher the level of the martial skill, the more difficult it was to practice, and it was not easy to get it. Even if there were a lot of martial skills in Tiangang's sect, if you wanted to practice high-level martial skills, you also needed to have a certain level of authority. Even with the identity of Di Beichun, some of the extremely great martial skills could not be leaked to cultivators outside the sect. Where did Bailey Hongzhuang get her hands on this level of martial arts? The level of the previous Azure Flame Holy Palm was already not low. She thought that Bailey Hongzhuang had used her strongest move, but she did not expect that there was a stronger move. She had previously learned about the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang. She was just an unloved young lady of a small dynasty. It was too strange for her to have this level of martial skill. Suddenly, Han Shiling's eyes lit up. Maybe it was Mo Yunjue who gave it to Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang took out a few qi recovery pills and quickly put them in her mouth. She had forcibly displayed this move, Ling Tian Demon Lotus. All the power in her body was almost drained and dried up. After Xia Jiqing and the others saw Bailey Hongzhuang display a martial skill that they had never seen before, their eyes were filled with amazement. They never knew when Bailey Hongzhuang had practiced this martial skill. Just by looking at the power of this martial skill, they could understand that it was definitely not easy to practice it. Speaking of which, Bailey Hongzhuang's background was more than they imagined. However, after a short surprise, Xia Jiqing and the others were more worried about the safety of Bailey Hongzhuang. Han Shiling's move seemed to be extremely simple. After this collision, the final result was really unpredictable. Boss won't be in danger. Xia Jiqing's eyes were filled with worry. She had successfully killed a cultivator with the help of Bai Junyu. Bai Junyu frowned as he looked at the confrontation between Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shiling. He was unable to determine the outcome of such a fierce battle. Bai Junyu immediately noticed that Mo Yunjue was also paying attention to the battle between Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shiling. With Mo Yunjue's strength, he shouldn't let anything happen to Hongzhuang. Bai Junyu said. Hearing this, Xia Jiqing also looked at Mo Yunjue. Sure enough, Mo Yunjue was frowning at this scene. Just from the way he stood, it was clear that Mo Yunjue was ready to act. The moment something happened to Boss, Missouri Yunjue would definitely take action. Seeing this, Xia Jiqing was relieved a little. At least, Mo Yunjue was stronger than them. Bailey Hongzhuang died. Han Shiling snorted coldly. With a thought, the Black Moon attacked Bailey Hongzhuang fiercely. Damn it, it's you. Bailey Hongzhuang also did not retreat. With a wave of her hand, the Demon Lotus flew towards the Black Moon. Boom! A thunderous sound resounded through the sky, and an extremely terrible Yuanli storm formed in the air. The originally bright sky became dark at the moment of the collision. The space of the whole world seemed to be completely distorted at this moment. The earth-shaking power made people tremble. Chapter 1421. The cultivators from the Qinrun Empire and the Myriad Cloud Empire who were originally fighting stopped after seeing such a terrifying energy collision and quickly retreated. Once this kind of energy raged, the power was extremely powerful. None of them wanted to be affected by such an aftermath, so they could only stop. However, after seeing the terrifying battle fluctuations of Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Shiling, everyone didn't know what to say. The energy that erupted from the two women was so amazing. As a cultivator of the Tiangang sect, Han Shiling's combat power was not enough to surprise people. But in the end, who was this Bailey Hongzhuang? Her attack power was actually so strong. It was simply too amazing. Since when did the cultivators from a medium-sized empire become so powerful? This kind of combat power is very amazing even in a large empire. Fortunately, we didn't become enemies with them. In the future, we have to be careful when we encounter a team from a medium-sized empire. If we encounter a monster with such a powerful combat power, then we are really unlucky. Feeling the crazy and raging energy, everyone cursed in their hearts. In comparison, the combat power of some large empires was not so terrifying. Bailey Hongzhuang is actually so powerful. Bailey Haoxuan was completely dumbfounded. The trash that was bullied by him all day long had now become so powerful. Even he couldn't help but applaud her combat power. If Bailey Hongzhuang was allowed to continue to develop, she might really become a famous figure in the Shengxian continent in the future. Maybe after the assessment competition, she would become a cultivator of a sect. At that time, the gap between them would really be an insurmountable gap. She is no longer the Bailey Hongzhuang of the past. After this assessment competition, we probably won't see her again. Xianyuan Huan's voice was filled with faint emotion and melancholy. A genius like Bailey Hongzhuang was not someone that could be retained by Fengbo Empire. The stupidest thing he had done in his life was to give up on Bailey Hongzhuang. Hearing Xianyuan Huan's words, Bailey Haoxuan was slightly taken aback, but he immediately acquiesced. The general's estate treated Bailey Hongzhuang so badly. With Bailey Hongzhuang's current ability, it was indeed possible for her not to return. At this moment, he finally understood why his father was so lonely when Bailey Hongzhuang left. Thinking about it, it was indeed a pity for the general's residence to lose such a great helper. Bailey Hongzhuang might die in this battle. Bailey Haoxuan's eyes flashed with uncertainty. Today's situation was already very obvious. Between Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Xiling, one of them must die. It was just that no one was sure who would die in the end. Xianyuan Huan clenched his fists and stared at the raging darkness in front of him. The battle between Bailey Hongzhuang and Han Xiling was also beyond Mo Yunjue's expectations. He did not expect that the two women would erupt with such terrifying power in the end. In this darkness, it was not easy for him to find Bailey Hongzhuang's location. What's more, the center of the storm was a place that no one dared to approach. The energy raged, the storm swept, and everyone even felt that the earth was shaking. Chapter 14:22. The smoke and dust gradually dissipated. The energy gradually calmed down, and the darkness that was shrouded in energy gradually regained its brightness in everyone's sight. However, after seeing the destruction in front of them, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Hiss! In their line of sight, the originally flat ground had become a mess, and in the center of the energy explosion, there was a huge, deep pit. Around the deep pit, cracks snaked out, and the ground cracked. The shape was terrifying. The surrounding trees had long been reduced to dust. In fact, even the restriction was showing signs of shattering. Such a terrible destructive power was not seen much on ordinary days. After seeing it at this moment, everyone could not suppress the shock in their hearts. Compared to the other onlookers who were sighing at the power of this destructive power, the cultivators of the Tiangang dynasty had already looked for Bailey Hongzhuang for the first time. They could feel the amazing energy just from the periphery of the raging energy. So how terrifying was Bailey Hongzhuang in the center of the energy explosion? However, Xia Jiqing and the others glanced around and did not find the figure of Bailey Hongzhuang at all. Even the figure of Mo Yunjue had disappeared. Boss! Xia Jiqing immediately walked forward, her pretty face full of worry, and her mouth kept calling the name of Bailey Hongzhuang. She only felt that her heart was squeezed, and she couldn't imagine what they would do if something happened to the boss. Boss! Yuan Xiaoman and Yuan Jixin also called Bailey Hongzhuang nearby. They believed that Bailey Hongzhuang must be here. Hongzhuang, Gong Xiaoqing, Dong Fengyu, and Bai Junyu's eyes were also full of worry and tension, and they were only praying that Bailey Hongzhuang would not have an accident. The cultivators in Han Xiling's team were also looking for the existence of Han Xiling, but compared to the previous 8-people team, there were only 3 people left. With the strength of Xia Jiqing and the others, they could completely solve these 3 cultivators together. However, in this situation, they were not in the mood to care about these 3 people. Finding Hongzhuang was the most important thing. However, no matter how Xia Jiqing and the others shouted, there was no response. Xia Jiqing's eyes had become red, and a touch of crystal quietly filled her eyes. No, nothing will happen to boss. Gong Shaoqing and the others were also frantically searching, digging into the ground. If they were buried under the yellow sand, it would not be long before they died. The surrounding cultivators were filled with emotions after witnessing this scene. It seems that both Han Xiling and Bailey Hongzhuang have perished. With such a terrifying collision of energy, you can imagine how powerful the power of the Central Zone was. These two people were so young, and their strength was so great. To think that they fell just like that, it really makes one sigh. Dong Hongyun and Pan Zimo looked at each other. They didn't know what to do in this situation. Something happened to Han Xiling. You're finished. Dong Hongyun looked at Pan Zimo coldly. Although this matter was a conflict between Han Xiling and Bailey Hongzhuang, it was still related to them. Pan Zimo looked at Dong Hongyun angrily. You only know that Han Xiling is a disciple of Tiangang Zong, but you don't know that Bailey Hongzhuang is the wife of the Tiangang Zong's young lord. Whether it's you or me, you think about it. Chapter 14:23. After Pan Zimo began to move, Dong Hongyun looked at Pan Zimo's back. His mind kept thinking about what Pan Zimo had said before, and his expression gradually changed. This was really unbelievable. Dong Hongyun's first thought was that Pan Zimo was lying to him. However, thinking of Pan Zimo's changing expression and the confidence he showed when talking to him, he faintly felt that what Pan Zimo said was true. Because Pan Zimo, who wanted to become a disciple of Tiangang's sect, could only restore his spirit with this reason. If Bailey Hongzhuang was really the wife of the young lord of Tiangang's sect, then wouldn't he be done for? At the thought of this, Dong Hongyun's face also became pale. Even if Han Xiling's position in Tiangang's sect was high, it could not be higher than the position of the young lord's wife. The cultivators of the Qin-run dynasty looked at Dong Hongyun's constantly changing face, and their eyes showed doubts. They didn't know what Pan Zimo said to Dong Hongyun that could make Dong Hongyun's face change. Dong Hongyun finally believed what Pan Zimo said, and immediately waved his hand and said, "Quick, let's find Bailey Hongzhuang together." Hearing this, the cultivators of the Qin-run dynasty couldn't help but ask, "Captain, if we find Bailey Hongzhuang, are we going to kill her?" "Kill your head. Why don't you kill yourself?" Dong Hongyun said angrily. "Hurry up and find Bailey Hongzhuang so that you don't have to apologize." As soon as these words came out, the cultivators of the Qin-run dynasty were stunned. They wanted to ask the reason, but Dong Hongyun had already started to move. Seeing this, they didn't dare to delay any longer and immediately started a search. "Boss!" Xia Jiqing kept shouting and kept telling herself that nothing would happen to the boss. She held back the tears in her eyes and didn't let them fall. At this moment, there was some movement on the ground not far from Xia Jiqing. Seeing this, Xia Jiqing immediately rushed over, and her hands kept digging the soil. "Boss, is that you?" Xia Jiqing's face was red, and her hands were trembling because of nervousness. When she dug into the soil, her nails overflowed with blood, but she didn't seem to feel it at all. After Gong Shaoqing and the others saw Xia Jiqing's actions, they also came to help. Under the joint efforts of everyone, a hand finally appeared in everyone's sight. However, this hand did not belong to Bailey Hongzhuang. It was a man's hand. After seeing the man's hand, Xia Jiqing and the others were stunned for a moment. Yuan Xiaoman immediately reacted and said, "This must be young Master Mo." Cough, cough. Mo Yunjue kept fiddling with the dirt on his head and finally appeared in front of everyone. "Young Master Mo, do you know where boss is?" Ignoring Mo Yunjue's current situation, Xia Jiqing immediately asked about Bailey Hongzhuang's situation. "I'm here." Bailey Hongzhuang's voice followed, and Xia Jiqing and the others were ecstatic. This at least proved that the boss was fine. However, this voice seemed to come from Mo Yunjue's side. "Chi!" Mo Yunjue's figure swept, and his whole person directly jumped out of the ground. The soil on top of his head was too thick, and it was not easy for him to exert his strength. After Mo Yunjue jumped out of the deep pit, he immediately went down. Bailey Hongzhuang's figure also appeared in front of everyone. Boss. Chapter 1424. They saw that Mo Yunjue's black robe was covered with dust at the moment. Compared to his handsome appearance before, the current Mo Yunjue was a bit embarrassed. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was pale, and her clothes were stained with blood, but the dust on her body was much less than Mo Yunjue's. After seeing this scene, everyone quickly understood. Before, it was Mo Yunjue who blocked Bailey Hongzhuang's body, so Bailey Hongzhuang's body was relatively clean. Bai Junyu and the others looked at Mo Yunjue with a bit of complexity. Before, they had noticed that Mo Yunjue had been paying attention to Bailey Hongzhuang's battle, ready to protect her at any time. They didn't expect that after the battle broke out, Mo Yunjue really protected Bailey Hongzhuang. Boss, how are you? I was scared to death just now. Xia Jiqing's voice revealed a bit of sob. She had never been so nervous. After not getting the news of the boss, she only felt that her whole person didn't know how to think. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head slightly. Although I suffered some injuries, the injuries are not too serious. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xia Jiqing and the others looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in disbelief. Just now, with such a tyrannical energy clash, how could Bailey Hongzhuang not be injured? However, Bailey Hongzhuang was telling the truth. The injuries on her body were all caused when she dealt with Han Shiling's Nining Phoenix Finger. Later, when she used the Ling Tian Demon Lotus, all the Yuan Qi in her body was exhausted, so she was not injured. At that time, she only felt darkness in front of her, and all the sand flew up. Then, she fell into an embrace. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately looked at Mo Yunjue. Mo Yunjue, how are your injuries? She was not injured because Mo Yunjue protected her. With such a terrifying energy impact, presumably Mo Yunjue's injuries were also very serious. With Bailey Hongzhuang's voice falling, the eyes of the Tiangang dynasty's cultivators fell on Mo Yunjue, and their eyes showed the same color of worry. Young Master Mo, where are you injured? Mo Yunjue waved his hand slightly. It's nothing. Hearing this, everyone looked at Mo Yunjue with a slightly surprised look. Could it be that Mo Yunjue's strength was strong enough, so the impact just now did not have much impact on him? What's more, from Mo Yunjue's calm look, they couldn't see the slightest difference in the slightest. Young Master Mo, Miss Bailey, it's great that you're all right. Pan Zimo hurried over after seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue were safe and sound. His handsome face was filled with a joyful smile. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Thank you for your concern. When the other cultivators saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue were safe and sound, their hearts were also filled with sorrow. I didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be so powerful. Han Shiling still hasn't been found. It seems that Bailey Hongzhuang has won this battle. Tiangang Sec's Han Shiling actually couldn't defeat Bailey Hongzhuang. In the future, I must find out what kind of person Bailey Hongzhuang is. This battle was really impressive. The result was also unexpected. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest who were so happy, the three cultivators in Han Shiling's team felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar at this moment. Who would have thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were so powerful, and the two demonic beasts that suddenly appeared were also extremely powerful. Chapter 1425. Pan Zimo placed a hand on Mo Yunjue's shoulder. Young Master Mo, you're really amazing. You've done a great job as her bodyguard. However, when Pan Zimo's hand came into contact with Mo Yunjue's back, he felt a burst of pain, and his brows furrowed. Pan Zimo retracted his hand, only to discover that his hand was covered in blood. Gong Shaoqing and the rest who were originally in a good mood were stunned when they saw this scene. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that Mo Yunjue's back was covered in blood, but because he was wearing a black brocade robe, it was not obvious. Mo Yunjue, you're injured. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes narrowed, and she quickly walked over to Mo Yunjue's side, only to discover that Mo Yunjue's back was stained red with blood. Previously, Mo Yunjue had used his body to protect her, and his back must have suffered a very serious injury. Mo Yunjua waved his hand, his expression as cheerful as ever. It's nothing. Such a small injury won't kill me. Young Master Mo, your injuries are so serious. Why aren't you applying medicine? Yuan Xiaoman was extremely worried after regaining her senses. Such a serious injury. And Mo Yunjue was still saying that it was a small injury? Looking at Mo Yunjue in such a state, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but recall the scene when she had first met Mo Yunjue. At that time, Mo Yunjue had also suffered a very serious injury, and if he had not met her, he would not have been able to keep his life. However, even under such intense pain, Mo Yunjue's face was still filled with an indifferent smile, as if the person who was injured was not him. Bailey Hongzhuang quickly took out a healing pill and fed it to Mo Yunjue. Before she had taken part in the assessment, Di Beichan had given her a few more precious pills. Facing such a Mo Yunjue, she felt a little helpless, and her heart was filled with guilt and gratitude. She should have been the one to bear these injuries, but Mo Yunjue had helped her bear them. If Mo Yunjue had not protected her at the critical moment, she would have been in a terrible situation. After all, Han Xiling was an extremely famous cultivator in Tiangang sect. His combat power was also extremely strong. It was more difficult to deal with him than she had imagined. Mo Yunjue stared intently at Bailey Hongzhuang. When he saw the worry in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, a hint of a smile appeared in his deep, handsome eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang took out her own medicine and said to Dong Fangyu, "Sprinkle this medicine on his wound." As a cultivator, it was unavoidable for them to get injured. Thus, golden sore ointment was especially important. This was the Bailey family's famous golden sore ointment. It was extremely effective and could stop the bleeding immediately. Dong Fangyu nodded slightly and directed Mo Yunjue to take off his clothes. When everyone saw Mo Yunjue's muscular upper body, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. On Mo Yunjue's body, the scars were especially eye-catching. On his chest, there was a terrifying and winding wound that almost split his body into two. Even Gong Shaoqing and the others couldn't help but exclaim after seeing this scene. With so many injuries, what exactly did Mo Yunjue go through? Even the mercenaries who lived a life of licking blood from the edge of the blade wouldn't have as many scars as Mo Yunjue. Dong Fangyu didn't delay any longer and immediately sprinkled the golden sore ointment on Mo Yunjue's injured back. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice rang out. "It will hurt a little when applying the golden sore ointment, but the effect is very good.